Needing only a draw to clinch the match, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played the solid Queen's Gambit accepted and reached a symmetrical pawn structure. Wesley So certainly kept a symbolic advantage though, but Mamedyarov remained solid enough. In the interview afterwards, he mentioned that he was not sure how to handle the Queen ending and therefore decided to play it actively. He was happy to have spotted the move Queen c3 from afar, which he understood would secure the draw. The other semi-final game between Alexander Grischuk and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave turned into a fascinating struggle from very early on. Who could have guessed that Grischuk would sidestep Vachier-Lagrave's beloved Grunfeld with rare and eccentric 3h4? The Frenchman thought for a while and decided to transpose into a Benko gambit with c5, d5 and b5. MVL considered that the premature advance of White's h-pawn is committal for White's kingside. In their respective debrief afterwards, both players cast doubt on the value of 15's rook e1. This was in fact a crucial moment in the game as Maxime Vachier-Lagrave offered a draw on his next move queen to b7. To his surprise, the Russian played on, but it seems as if he slightly overestimated his chances. In any case, the return of the rook with 18's rook f1 felt like a concession, which the Frenchman answered in very powerful manner. The whole sequence of moves starting from 19's rook f to c8 and running up to 26 rook c2 completely shook the Russian. Indeed, Grischuk spotted some of his moves a little late and even missed the strong intermediate move 23 knight to b2. He ended up in a time trouble and understandably failed to put up the strongest resistance. After the time control, Vachier-Lagrave increased the pressure with 42nd g5 and eventually broke the White's position. In the post-game interview, Grischuk showed exemplary fair play and praised his opponent for his great game. Good afternoon everyone, and we are back with live coverage of Riga Grand Prix. That's a big moment we were all waiting for after a couple of 3 days.
Right.
That's the final time, so 2 players left, and in next 2 or rather 3 days, I expect the tiebreak is very likely to happen between those 2 brilliant players. We will know the name of a winner of Riga Grand Prix.
Yeah, we had 2-3 days for the players to relax and also for the spectators to do something else. And we are back in the action and finally to find out who is the best player here in Riga.
Right, so, well, a quick reminder how this all has happened so that Mamedyarov and Vachier-Lagrave will meet each other in the final. Vachier-Lagrave didn't spend all that much energy, had a free day after each round, but, well, it took him to win every match in classical time control. So 1.5 in each match against David Navara first, then Veselin Topalov, then Alexander Grischuk. For Mamedyarov it was a little bit less smooth, so he won 1.5 in classical chess against Daniil Dubov. Then he had a tiebreak, but, well, not such a tough one against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Only 2 rapid games were required. And then finally he was, he defeated Wesley So in the semi-finals, once again with...
I would say probably the 2 of the best players here in the Riga Grand Prix, they have reached the final because it took for them the least amount of games to be played, while Vachier-Lagrave, I mean, he didn't even need a single tiebreak to be played. For Shak it was only 1 tiebreak.
Yeah, and those 2 happen to be the only players who managed to finish at least 1 match in classical time controls, because all the others who advanced from round 2 to round 1, round 2 and so on, they had to play tiebreak. So those 2 are the only players who managed to win a classical game and classical match.
And what is a funny fact, these were 2 players that we visited we in the studio the most, because Maxime was here in the studio with us 3 times and Shak was
a couple of times
for sure. And they're in the final.
So the first game has started. First move was made by Andris Steinmanis, the general manager of Kaspersky in Baltic countries. And the game started with 1 d4, not a big surprise from Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. I believe that's, his main move. Well, from time to time he might play something else, but very often it's d4. No surprises from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. It's the Grunfeld, and I'm delighted to see that Shach actually goes for the real thing, for the Grunfeld.
Right.
Well, perhaps he managed to find, or he or his team managed to find, some idea. It's very hard to expect the refutation of a Grunfeld nowadays, but maybe some playable idea to try to bring an early surprise to very experienced Grunfeld player, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave.
I thought perhaps it would be too much for us to expect the second game in a row to be played third move h4, as Alexander Grischuk played in the semifinal. I thought that was a very interesting idea, but I'm sure that Maxime has done his homework already, so I don't think we're going to see it.
Yeah, so what we have on the board is once again somewhat early deviation, but I believe Shakhriyar Mamedyarov has played it already. It's check on a4 on move 7, trying to disrupt normal development from black. So queen check on a4, and as far as I can see, Maxime went with queen to d7.
I'll very quickly check if they have played something like that before. They have played it. It was one game between them. Bishop b5 was actually played in the game. I'll try to find which game it was actually. Yeah, so it's
some years ago.
Yeah, no, it's actually last year from Sinquefield Cup. They played both of them against each other. This exact line, and after Bishop b5, the game continued with c6, Bishop d3. Probably, I would imagine we are going to show it in quite a short time. And I mean, anyway, both of the players are pretty much familiar with this line. They have played against each other between them. So I would assume that Shakhriyar has prepared something new.
Yeah, so Shakhriyar went with queen a4 to a3 very quickly, and not only the speed he made this move with, but also the action, so that he makes a move, he rised up from the board, right, and he'll be walking on the scene. So that all sends a clear message to Maxime that this is my new idea for this game, and go and try to show that you are ready.
Well, it's not definitely a new move against Grunfeld, because queen a3 has been played a number of times before, and actually Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has met it already before, back in 2015, when he was playing against Sebastian Bogner in Bundesliga. Bogner with white, he played queen a3, and Maxime proceeded to b6, bishop b7, followed by c5, and presumably got a normal game, and the game ended in a draw. So there must be some sort of a surprise for Shakhriyar to show for us.
Yeah, well, the queen on a3 itself is not that badly placed, right? As white will, well, it looks a bit weird right now, like that white developed the queen like at first place. But when white finishes the development, brings the rooks to the center, then usually you do look for a place to put the queen on. And sometimes it goes to d2, e3, sometimes it goes somewhere else. Well, queen on a3 is not necessarily a bad thing to have. So before we switch to analysis board mode, I'd like to once again to remind the names of the sponsors, the companies that support World Chess, and the companies which made this event as well as many other, hopefully many other events in future possible with their cooperation with World Chess. So it's Algorand, exclusive blockchain partner of World Chess, Fosagra, the official strategic partner, Kaspersky, official security partner, and EG Capital Advisors, the official partner of World Chess as well. So I believe we are ready to switch into this view, which is on your screen. So one more time, queen a4, a move which is called for, well, sort of disrupting what black would normally like to do. So if you just develop your pieces, black goes c5, castles, the knight develops to c6, right? So after queen a4, if you put the knight on c6, that means you forgot to play c5. If you go knight d7, which is, by the way, the legit move, I mean, one of the normal moves here, then at least your knight is not on c6, so less pressure on white's center. And bishop d7 is as well somewhat awkward. After bishop d7, if I remember correctly, it's queen b3 attacking b7, so once again. So all those moves are possible. C6 is the move as well. But queen d7 could be the most, the most straightforward. So if the queens are exchanged, black usually
Probably
is
doesn't
fine.
have any trouble.
Yeah, then the line Artur's mentioned was played previously was bishop b5.
It was bishop b5, and after c6. Yeah, after bishop b5, c6, bishop d3. Both of these players, they played against each other last year in Singfield Cup in St. Louis, and after bishop d3, castle, knight f3, c5, Shakhriyar actually proceeded with queen takes on d7, bishop takes on d7, rook b1, b6, and bishop e3.
Bishop e3, so something very typical for the Grunfeld. I mean, the way of the pieces are developed. The bishop on d7, well, maybe not ideal, but in some positions, even moves like bishop a4, targeting the d1 rook, which potentially is there, or just accepting that you've lost the tempo and then bishop g4 in some cases. Anyway, seemingly Maxime had no problem equalizing at that game. The game finished in a draw. So a new move for those two. Queen a3 was played, but as was mentioned, Maxime already had such game against Sebastian Bogner,
right?
And b6, precisely the same move as Maxime has played back in 2015, is on the board right now.
Yeah, now Shakhriyar is thinking, definitely he is not surprised, because this is exactly what Maxime already played before, and he knows this game. Probably he's just sitting there trying to remember the analysis.
He did play knight f3 after like 1 minute or something. He did play knight f3. Right. So knight f3 was the game. Well, can we go through the game between Bogner and
we probably should.
Quickly?
So knight f3 was in the game we mentioned. Bishop b7, bishop d3. c5 is quite a common pawn sacrifice. Well, normally white doesn't want to take the pawn on c5 because it just gives too good game for black. Castle, castle, rook d1, c takes on d4, c takes on d4, knight c6.
Rook d1, c takes, knight c6.
Knight c6, bishop b2, e6, rook a to c1, and knight a5. So probably around here we can stop. White got a nice control on the center, and Shakhriyar proceeded with knight e5, and he was trying to complicate matters. And after queen d8, the players, after 41 moves, they... I'm sorry, not Shakhriyar. Sebastian Bogner, I'm sorry. Yeah. He played knight e5, and after 41 moves, the game finished in a draw. So presumably Shak has prepared something new here, definitely to test at least for one game, which he actually already mentioned for us in the studio when he played this very nice game against Wesley So, this a2 a3 idea in the Catalan. And he said, okay, for one game, it's a great idea.
Well, that's the thing with modern theory, right? Well, it's very hard nowadays to find a system, and especially with white, like with black, you tend to have a stable opening repertoire, which from time to time needs, kind of refurbishment, rebrushing, right? So you check this particular line. Okay, maybe it is problematic, so let's change it quite a bit. But usually you do have some stable openings, like I'm playing the Berlin, right? Very solid. Yeah. With white, well, white wants a bit more than a draw, a bit more than an equal position. So you are forced to look for those quirky lines which you can, well, implement in one game, well, maybe a couple of games if the light is complex enough. But usually, yeah, it's white who is searching for the ways to surprise his opponent early on.
Yes, because I already mentioned it before in one of our previous broadcasts. It is so difficult just to outplay opponent without showing any surprises in your opening, right? You just cannot play like Reti and then you hope that you're going to outplay your opponent in a very nice, easy manner. Everybody is so skilled with the positional finesse, and this is why you essentially need some kind of a surprise. And this is why, for example, in Shakhriyar's case, this a2, a3 was super successful.
Yeah, and he confessed afterwards, and once again, that's the game against Wesley So we are talking about. He confessed afterwards that black had a direct way to make a forced draw. Right. It's just you can imagine, I mean, how hard it is nowadays to get anything with white. So players from time to time, they just go for such positions that if your opponent knows everything, then no problem, it's a draw. But first, of course, he has to find quite a few precise moves.
Right. And Maxime is thinking. I'm not sure if he actually remembers the particular game which he already played before 4 years ago. But probably he's just trying to familiarize himself with the options available here. All of the ideas are quite standard for black. I mean, normally if you are playing the Grunfeld, you should play c7, c5 pretty much no matter what.
Yeah. So sooner or later we can expect c7, c5 to happen. Usually you are not that worried about white taking on c5, as to mention, bishop b7, bishop d3. So far we are following the footsteps of Bogna Vachier-Lagrave game from 2015.
Right. And perhaps he also needed to spend some time trying to remember, not to remember, but trying to understand what exactly is my opponent preparing here. I mean, you do not automatically play these moves because essentially when you are playing against a very strong opponent in the final of the Grand Prix, you would expect that your opponent has prepared something. And this is why, I mean, normally, obviously, he knows these moves, but okay, he wants to spend some additional idea, perhaps to figure it out. Where is my opponent exactly heading?
Yeah, so bishop d3 played pretty quickly, and the game between Bogna and Vachier-Lagrave, so in this game in 2015, Vachier-Lagrave was playing c5 before castle, right?
Yeah, because castle might be slightly dangerous, perhaps, because you need to understand what is going to happen after something like a standard h to h4. I'm not saying it's possible immediately, but definitely something along the lines might be possible.
It could be, in fact, it could be that h4 is a possible move. Or other thing is that, once again, I'm not a big expert in those Grunfelds, but I can imagine if white plays something like rook b1, so that after c5 I have d5, after e6 I'm able to play c4. This might be another moment where black is somewhat concerned, right? So after an immediate c5, you can't really play d5 because e6, well, you can, but then there is no c4 move as such because there is still a pin on this rook, right? So white is forced into very unfavorable trade. Right. More or less has to take on e6.
So c5 makes more sense, actually, so that white doesn't have access to this h4, so that he cannot play rook b1. But really, if I'm Vachier-Lagrave, I'm thinking if I need to repeat this game as far as possible, or I want to divert as quickly as possible. Yeah.
So, well, let's maybe try to explain. Yeah, dc5, well, in this case, doesn't even win a pawn because black can recapture back, the bishop on d3 is hanging. But black might as well consider something like this. Yeah, right. Knight a6, the knight cannot be taken twice. This line doesn't work for white because bishop takes c3. And otherwise, well, it's not clear what to do. The black wants to capture on c5 with the knight. If white takes on b6, then a, b, and once again, knight c5 is a serious threat.
And look, and Maxime has diverted. He decided to play castle first.
So he plays castle short instead of c5. Oh, well, quite interesting. The other thing I thought could be explained here, that after c5, if white goes for knight e5, which, well, might be a move to consider because to move the queen means white's going to give a check on b5, which might be unpleasant. But I assume that this is an absolutely playable position. Yeah?
Bishop on d3.
Ah, well, there is a bishop on d3
really work
hanging.
immediately.
Yeah, this knight e5 is not such a great move.
At least not immediately.
Yeah, for some reason. Yeah, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah, but I mean, this
I wanted to explain. Yeah, I mean, let's imagine the bishop is somewhere here. In such structures, black is not that scared of giving the bishop from g7 away. Because, again, knight a5, he will try to create some play on light squares. Yeah, so this is, I mean, that is a possible structure. I remember having something like this with white, and at first glance I was very happy because I have the bishop on c1 and stuff, but yeah, but here it's absolutely impossible, yeah, because black simply takes on d3.
Right.
So castles was played instead.
And Shak has still yet to play, but he's not at the board, if he can see correctly, and I wonder if this is some sort of a provocation. I don't know. I mean, do you provoke Shak to play h2, h4?
h4, he
I don't know.
might play it. Yeah, well, my question, though, is queen g4 a possible move? Is queen g4 a possible move, attacking both g2 and e4?
Yeah, probably is. I mean, h4 doesn't feel like a right move here because it doesn't exactly come with a direct threat. But although, I mean, this h2, h4 idea in the ground field has been a hugely popular idea, and sometimes it brings great results, and sometimes it's just outright ridiculous move, which might be exactly this case.
Well, it is very common idea indeed, and I believe it makes a lot of sense in many positions because you have your center, right? And black is trying to play on the queen side, like opening the c file, jumping with knight c6, knight a5. So a lot of black pieces there are on the queen side, and that of course you want, or you try to organize the attack where the black king is, and at the same time, well, not a lot of black pieces to help this king. But perhaps in this particular case, yeah, queen g4 is sort of annoying.
Yeah, but Chuck already made the move very quickly. I didn't even notice at which time. I mean,
it is
castle is on the board, so no h4 today. At least not right now. And the game still might divert back to the game between Bogner and Vachier-Lagrave back in 2015.
With c7, c5, yeah.
Right. If Maxime here would play c5, I mean, he is not obliged to do it. He could develop his knight first, but I mean, c5 makes more sense to be honest.
So once again, c5, rook d1, that was the game. Yes,
right.
c takes, knight to c6,
and bishop
b2,
e6.
e6, rook went to c1, Maxime played knight a5.
And knight e5.
Knight e5, queen d8, and bishop c3 was played.
And
yeah,
bishop
because
c3.
I was looking at this position, I wasn't necessarily sure that this is, this is acceptable for black. It looks a bit dangerous in view of bishop b4, bishop b5 winning an exchange.
Well, this must be Shak's preparation. At least he saw some chances here for white, and probably he decided it's good enough for one game. So there is some good probability we are going to see it. But what are the other options for black here? So let's imagine, I mean, okay, we are not playing c5.
Yeah. So it's either c5 or e5. I mean, not that many options, right?
Right, but how do you play
I can play e5 at once, right? Since we established that the bishop on d3 is indeed hanging, can it be that black wants to play e5?
Well, I checked the database. So far, this position, exactly after short castling, not including c5, has been played 6 times between quite good grandmasters, by the way. And all of the games follow with element move c5 for black. So essentially, we are reaching the position we mentioned about before. So I wonder what Maxime is thinking here. He probably is thinking, what are my other options here? Yeah,
can I somehow really divert at very early stage, not to have the familiar line, not to have the game that I've already played, and therefore not to have the game where Mamedyarov might have something prepared.
Yeah, I mean, Maxime is one of the most famous groundfield experts in the world. He probably knows pretty much everything about the line. So, yeah, I wonder what he is going to play.
So c5
was played. Yeah.
Yeah. Now rook d1 we expect as the move for white.
Unless Shak is already ready to divert.
Yeah, but once again, it's not clear. How do you do it, right? I mean, d4 pawn, it's not really attacked, but at the same time, it is worrisome. You have to put, well, not the pawn perhaps, but the bishop on d3. This is what is irritating. So I would assume rook d1 is a decent move. Well, you might say that I'm putting the bishop on b2 and then the other rook on d1. But if you put the bishop on b2 at such an early stage, that black might as well say, okay, now I'm no longer taking on d4, and your bishop on b2 is just stupid, right? So once again, to remind you what has happened in the game between Bogner and Vachier-Lagrave, it made a lot of sense. Rook d1, then black first takes on d4, gives knight c6. Then, of course, white is happy to play bishop b2, because there is a potential that this is not the proper diagonal. This diagonal is getting open, the bishop's getting swapped, and this would be in white's favor. Yeah, white is looking for a move d4, d5 now.
But Shak made a move.
Bishop to f4. Okay.
That's a novelty. Here you go.
That's a novelty. This, at least, yeah, if we want to develop the bishop, this move makes much more sense than bishop b2.
Bishop f4 has never been played before, so here you go. You have another novelty by Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, so the question is, how dangerous is it? I mean, I'm not so sure that Maxime will immediately realize it's a novelty, because, I mean, it's a normal developing move.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it is a technical novelty, and I wonder what is the idea. It must be an idea, I would imagine, at some point, if black plays knight c6, for example. If,
then we probably go d5.
d5 and knight e5. I would imagine that is the
d5,
idea.
yeah, the knight is getting kicked away to a5. Then
Or
knight,
maybe not knight e5.
knight
I'm not
e5
sure.
or... Yeah, okay. I mean, if white plays something like rook d1, then black possibly wants to play c4, right?
Right. And then bishop c2, bishop a4, and suddenly all of white's pieces seem to be placed quite optimally.
Ah, yeah, bishop. Actually, knight on a5 is still terribly priced, yeah? Yeah, maybe that's the moment, you know, after bishop f4, maybe this is the moment for black to take on d4. Maybe this is the moment to take on d4. So if c takes, to take on d4 one more time seems to be really scary.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you don't want to give up such a powerful bishop on g7 for a pawn. I mean, we can very quickly show it.
Yeah,
I don't think it's possible, though.
Like knight takes, I assume, yeah?
Yeah, queen takes, and something like...
rook d1, no?
Rook d1 also requires yet another sacrifice.
Oh, wait, I can take this one, in fact, right? Because b7 bishop is hanging, and then there are moves like bishop h6.
Or bishop e5 as well.
Maybe just
right.
queen e7.
Yeah, I mean, definitely this looks dangerous. So normally good players just don't consider such a move. So I would see queen e7. My opponent plays it very quickly. It's just illogical, so I would not exactly consider taking bishop on d4.
Yeah, but cd5, and now playing a move like knight c6 might be an idea, right?
Yeah.
So once again, something for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to think. And those two players, they played quite a lot of games against each other,
Yeah,
right?
they have played a number of games, and what is actually quite interesting is that between meeting each other, Shakhriyar is supposedly a big favorite, because they have played, let me see, exactly 13 draws, and Shakhriyar has managed to beat Maxime 6 times and suffering only 1 loss.
Okay, so that's quite a plus for Shakhriyar
Quite a
Mamedyarov.
plus, right. And the last time they played a game which ended in a victory for either of the players, it was last year in Biel, which was a very fantastic tournament for Shakhriyar. He won the tournament, he won Maxime, he also won the reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen in the tournament. And back then, they played another resulting game in 2016 European Club Cup, and the last 4 games, which ended in a decisive result, it was actually Mamedyarov who was victorious. So
Yeah, so, well, Shakh might look at this encounter with quite an optimism, right?
yeah, and when it comes to the rapid and blitz games, then Maxime has the better score, he equalizes the total score. But, I mean, in the classical games so far, Shakhriyar has been showing better results. But, I mean, perhaps it's not really that important because, like we mentioned in the semi-final of Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Alexander Grischuk, prior to the match, Maxime had never won Grischuk in a classical game.
Yeah, so he never won a single classical game before the semi-final, but he did so in the semi-final. And
Right.
this is what counts in these tournaments, and not the previous results.
So these streaks, they have to end sooner or later, and so perhaps it's not so important, but somewhere deep in the mind, this thought, perhaps it's sitting there, so you sort of remember, okay, I mean, this guy is really, I'm very comfortable playing against this guy. I mean, there have been many examples, like Nakamura playing against Carlsen, for example. There are some players who you just cannot play, so perhaps for Maxime, Shakhriyar is not exactly... a good player to meet. But, I mean, still, we'll see what is going to happen.
Okay, now, looking at this position, I'm still trying to figure out what's the way for black. Can I really take on d4 and play knight c6 would be my question.
I think he's trying to understand, should he take on d4 before playing knight c6 or not?
Yeah, but
That's his choice.
But it really looks like if he plays knight c6 and d5 happens, then it seems to be awkward, because really knight a5, as we've mentioned, there is knight e5, there is just some move like rook d1. Actually, once again, I mean, whenever I see those Kronfurts, I really want to play c4 just to sack the exchange, because it looks like white is getting serious compensation, like a huge center. I mean, if bishop takes a1, rook a1, then queen to c3, bishop to h6, some e5s there. If black goes for f6, it might be enough compensation even here.
Well, you never know. Perhaps that's the idea.
Yeah, so, I mean, it feels a bit, or the whole lot dangerous, in fact, to play knight c6. And once again, having the bishop on b7 might be a sort of a disadvantage here, because after d5, technically the knight is not hanging on c6. Like if white takes on c6, black would take on d3. So a move like e6, in some other circumstances with bishop on c8, could have been possible.
Right, because the bishop on d3 is hanging, so you cannot really take on c6, presumably.
Yeah, it's like, and if you play c4, then let's say knight is getting the additional square on b4, and I believe this is a typical idea in one of the Grunfus. But okay, not in our case, because if something like e6 is played, white is just takes one piece, takes the other, wins the game. So knight c6 d5 would mean that the knight has to leave to a5, and then, yeah, as we said, this looks promising for white. So I would think black has to take, or if he doesn't want to, then he will have to spend the tempo on something like e7, e6 first. Or to play e7, e6, then this is still not possible, right? And after a move like rook a to d1, I assume that the point of developing the bishop earlier is to put the queenside rook on d1 and the other rook possibly on e1, not to try to challenge black on the c file, but go for a more central approach. And then black can decide what to do. But no, c takes d4, c takes d4 is already on the board, and knight c6 had been played.
Yeah, so Maxime remains principled and plays the most logical moves. At least at the moment, he doesn't see the need to trying to divert, although he has to be aware that it's very likely that his opponent is still well within his preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. So what to do after knight c6? Because after a move like rook a to d1, for example, if I'm playing black, I'm seriously considering to take this pawn. Right? Takes. And white has to prove the risk compensation. I mean, it's not obvious, right?
Right, something like bishop b1, and maybe how do you get away
b1?
From the spin? It's not so easy.
You mean it's like the pin is quite annoying.
Yeah, so I thought perhaps bishop e5 is a threat. I'm not so sure if this works
I'll say rook
or not.
fd8. And then, once again, I'm not claiming that this is absolutely sound, but in some Grunfus, what they do to bishop e5 is just take.
Right, but actually it makes sense. I mean,
rook takes, yeah.
And unless white manages to win something immediately, I think it's just fine for black.
Yeah, in the long run, it's a fine position for black. Yeah.
You put the bishop on d4, strengthen it with the move e7, e5, and it's so difficult for white to play. Maybe it's even black who is playing for the win later.
I mean, if you give black all the time in the world, he can start to be interested playing this one for a win.
Yeah.
Like exactly putting the bishop d4, maybe to c5 later on to occupy the d file. And okay, but anyway, this is very topical idea for white. Yeah, of course, just to play rook a d1 and to try to sacrifice the d4 pawn.
But I would imagine he's going to play. Can he play d5 now?
Yeah,
I think he can.
that's the other question. d5 now, bishop to a1 seems to be out of question because white simply takes on c6 intermediate. So d5 is not an actual exchange sacrifice. And then black will have a choice to go for knight a5 or to try to play knight d4
I would imagine knight a5 is the aggressive move, trying then to destroy white's center with either the means of e6 or f5, one of those. But knight e4 is, I mean, black is playing for the equality.
Yeah, knight d4, and then let's say, once again, white has some move like knight e5, but then it's not to everyone's liking to leave the knight on d4. So much more often it will be something like this, and then once again you have to be you have to understand the Grunfeld to actually know what is going on here.
But this is actually going to be a big choice, a big decision for Maxime, because like you mentioned, this knight d4 and knight e5 idea, it looks something that you could actually prepare on, at home preparation.
It's like some quick, let's say...
because the knight on d4, it might be in trouble later, because...
right. In fact, if black plays something like queen d8, then all of a sudden queen b4 attacks the knight,
like
which, well, it's not easy to live with this knight, yeah?
Right.
So it might lead to something very, very complex.
Well, obviously, it is possible for a very good player to calculate these lights and consequences, but at least from afar, if my opponent is prepared, I would be slightly concerned to put the knight on d4. So knight a5 would be the safe choice. But then again, the knight on a5, it might be just out of the game for quite a long time.
Once again, I'm playing rook c1, let's say. Yeah, in this case, it seems that I have to control the c file to stop potential knight c4s. Rook to c1, by the way, threatening rook c7. After rook c8, once again, playing something like knight e5. I never understood those Grunfelds, because this seems to be just you know...
It's great for white.
Very pleasant for white with no obvious drawbacks. It's like black is seemingly not on time to play e6 or f5, because white is simply getting there.
So it really amazes me that both of the players have managed to play extremely logical line, and we have a novelty at move, whichever move it was.
To move 12,
move
bishop
12,
to f4.
we have a novelty. So it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a popular opening, and it's being contested thousands of times, and still, I mean, you can play the normal moves and you have a novelty on the board.
Yep, d5 played, and Maxime, it looked like he was reaching one of the pieces, but in fact he adjusted the pawn on d5 because, as we've already mentioned, that's a big decision for him.
Right. I mean, even a knight d4, presumably, if white takes on d4, if Maxime would know that if white would take on d4, he would probably play it automatically, I would imagine, because he should be happy with the trade, right? So, I mean, takes... takes,
yeah. Usually
okay.
Usually it's fine, yeah. Rook c8, well, rook c1, rook to c8, even though the a7 pawn might be... okay, let's put this rook to c8 just to avoid any
so let's see what happens after rook takes on c8. Still, it's not so clear.
Rook takes, now we can take with the rook, because queen a7, rook a8, yeah? But in general, I would say that if you get rid of those knights, you are not that scared with black about the center, right?
That's because the pawns are not marching forward. White cannot easily play e4, e5 and create a passed
d5
pawn.
is always hanging.
So, but I would really be concerned. I mean, if I'm black, what happens after knight e5?
Is really scary.
You know what? I really start to like this new idea of bishop f4. I'm pretty sure it is a known idea, except of this particular position. Nobody had played it before, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, you position the bishop so actively, you prepare the knight e5 idea. So I would imagine it comes together with this whole concept to play d5 and knight e5. So that's a brilliant idea by Mamedyarov.
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at black's other options, there are not too many. If you take on d4, that seems to be game over.
Right.
Right? I mean, the knight is getting caught on well, knight b5, but it's not the position you want to play. I mean,
that's a bad position.
Just a bad position for black. Queen to d6 doesn't really seem to work, because takes, knight c4.
Well, unless it holds somehow by tactics, bishop a6, bishop d6, rook f to c8, but I don't believe it.
This could be, technically could be some line that black holds, but once again, I mean, if you don't know exactly, it's very, seems to be very dangerous to enter such positions, right?
Right.
Even though, yeah, it's possible to imagine black plays bishop a6 and somehow tactically holds the pawn. So this option is not completely ruled out. And after queen d8, then once again, the question is if this knight is getting or not getting trapped. Because after queen b4, which the move I thought would be winning automatically, well, technically knight e6 is not yet losing a piece. Takes here.
It would not really surprise me that knight e4 is the best move. And black has to play it and understand what happens after knight e5. It would be essentially the same what Shakhriyar already played against Wesley So.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to pick up these difficult moves, and it's not so obvious, and you have prepared them. And, for example, after this 94, 95, can we have it on the board?
95.
So I'm just guessing, for example, the best line for black, presumably to equalize, let's imagine something like Queen D8, for example, Queen B4, you have to pick up some moves like G5,
could be this.
Bishop G3 and F5. I mean, this is pure fantasy, but something like that.
Imagine that this works, and then, unless you find this, you're not equalizing in this game. Then, of course,
I mean, this is just an example how top GMs prepare. I mean, you would have to pick up something like that along the lines, so it involves doing really great homework, and I'm sure...
By the way, does knight escape like this?
What is that?
Because when you take, it's bishop e5, queen d5. That's what I thought. Attacking g2 and attacking e5.
Well,
and could be that this is, once again, could be that this works for black. The problem is that I'm not forced to take the f5 knight, and then, I'm probably bringing one of the rooks to a center.
And I mean, and Shakhriyar did not hide it in the studio that he was not exactly bluffing, but if Wesley So would pick up the best continuations, so most likely he would just repeat the position and in a draw. So perhaps this is one of those tests. I mean, you have to find those difficult moves. So, and if you don't, then white just gets a very good position.
Yeah, absolutely, because once again, when we said this is a possible move, but the position, even by Grunfeld standards, it doesn't look attractive for black, right? Because when you put the bishop on b7, I believe the whole idea is that you play e6 early on so that there is no d5 for white. And now the bishop looks silly. Yeah, rook c7 is a threat, knight e5 is the other positional threat, so looks very scary for black.
Yeah, because essentially we can have a look at what happened yet again in the game between Sebastian Bogner and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, where Bogner played this 12th move, rook d1.
So it was
instead of the bishop
rook d1, c takes,
knight c6, bishop b2 and e6, and you can see the difference. And here Maxime managed to play e6. I think it's
rook
quite
c1
important.
and already the knight to a5, and even this game it wasn't so easy for black, but he managed to hold it.
So essentially, I think this is an improvement and well done homework by Shakhriyar. And now the question is knight d4 working or not? Well, it's difficult to tell.
Yeah, but as we agreed, not that many other options. Yeah, knight a5 seems to be leading to a worse position, and I don't really see a third move. Okay, knight d8, but this is not how you play chess.
But I mean, still, Maxime is such a creative and strong player who does the calculation really well, so perhaps he can... Now he went for
knight a5.
So that's the safe choice.
Okay, maybe he'll prove us wrong. Maybe knight a5 is indeed playable.
But perhaps that indeed was what Shakhriyar was hoping for. I don't know.
Now maybe it's time to think for white. Do I want to play rook c1 first, the move I was making automatically, or I want to start with knight e5? Point being that after rook a c1, maybe black has this, so the other rook goes to c8, so that after knight e5, it's a bit more harmonious to put the queen on d8 and then still be able to trade the rooks via the c file.
Yeah, so the question is, what happens after knight e5 and queen d6? Because that would ask for some sort of a sacrifice.
An immediate knight e5. Indeed, black plays queen d6. And if I take, black takes.
Doesn't seem like it's working, does it?
That's a problem, That's a problem, because I really, really would love to play knight d7. And then if you take, I'm probably happy. Once again, can't really say, but I'm probably happy taking on f8, taking on a1, presumably, but rook d8 seemed to just trap the horse on d7.
Right.
Yeah, so knight e5 doesn't really work, perhaps.
Well, okay, white is not obliged to take on d6, but bishop e5 is a threat.
Yeah, well, so you don't...
This is
probably
awkward.
You don't play this.
Yeah,
this is like self-pinning. So perhaps you go really with rook ac1 first.
Well, okay, I mean, technically there's also a move rook a to b1 with the threat to play bishop b5, but I mean...
it also makes sense, but then let's say I do the same, and once again, bishop b5 I'm sort of prepared for, because queen d8, and then knight c4 is a possible idea.
Well, I mean, still this position feels like a success for white, because to get quite such a good position after the opening,
it's very rare.
It's quite rare, yeah.
For the Grunfeld,
I mean, at least visually, I don't know what the computer says and their viewers. We are not using any engines here, at least by the looks how the game is proceeding. It looks like a solid advantage for white. I mean, white managed to play d5. The knight on a5 is sort of out of the game, and white has so many ways to continue. And I would imagine that Shak is trying to remember his analysis. Perhaps he was sort of bluffing with this 94, 95 idea, and Maxime didn't feel like he wants to go there. He felt he's going to hold this position, but it looks good. It looks good for
Okay, so for instance, once again, the move I've mentioned, rook fc8. Now we are playing knight e5. Could it be that queen d6 is still a move? So for some reason I was not really looking at it, but maybe queen d6 is still a move black has to play. Or indeed to go queen d8.
Well, queen d6 is sort of risky, isn't it? I mean, after queen d6 I can just... oh no, I cannot. I had this great idea. Takes and knight c4, but I missed bishop a6. Or did I miss it? I'm not sure.
That's once again, it's very hard to tell. Yeah, knight c4. If black goes bishop a6.
Because my idea was if black would trade on c4, then I would get some sort of a better endgame.
Yeah,
like
this feels like simply better for white. Yeah, so bishop stuck, d6 weak. Once again, if you go bishop e5, then white seemingly is fine to exchange, and you know, bishop b5, d6, d7 in some positions. So this at least feels extremely risky.
Yes.
Maybe it works for black, but
yeah, but
again,
bishop a6 is a problem, at least presumably.
Yeah, knight c4, bishop a6 seems to be a problem, because in case of knight takes, black first takes on c1, of course, and then can it be this?
Yes. This is
takes
what I
on
just
c1
saw.
and bishop a6.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still not very clear, is it?
Yeah, kind of exchange sacrifice, takes here, and then, I mean, if black takes on f1, which I'm not sure again, the knight on a5 is sort of stuck, and moreover, there might be some funny positions where white goes knight c8, paralyzes the rook, like in case of, I don't know what for, but black plays bishop f8, for instance, knight goes to c8, and then black is totally paralyzed, because knight c4 allows white to win the exchange back with bishop b7. So the rook is arrested on a8, the knight is on a5, and white has passed pawns in the center. So this idea might work, in fact.
Well, it might. I mean, okay, black obviously is not obliged to play queen d6, so what would be the safe move?
He can go queen d8.
Yeah, queen d8 probably.
But then what I was thinking, that it could be something around c6 square. Like white playing bishop b5, then...
This is so dangerous for black. I don't know. How do you play this position?
For instance, if black goes a6, white plays knight c6 or bishop c6, something starts with something, knight c6, bishop takes, and it all ends up with white having a very dangerous passed pawn. I mean, if something like this is on the board, then it's a trouble for black.
Well, Maxime looks very relaxed at the moment. He's not really concerned. He believes in his capabilities to find the best moves.
Let's see what Shach will come up with. That's officially like first time in this game where Shakhriyar is using his time he's given. Like, I mean, before that, he managed to accumulate quite a few extra minutes, was using those, and now it's officially his clock shows less than 1 hour 30.
Perhaps that only proves my point that knight e4 probably was the best move. Somehow it was working, and his preparation ended right there. If black is going to play knight f5, okay, then you have some sort of obvious advantage, some ideas, but naturally he didn't prepare it infinitely. So
yeah, because you have no guarantee this position will happen, right? I mean, for some it might be surprising. How is that? 2 legal moves, he checked one and he doesn't remember the other. But can you imagine, I mean, how many other things he had to look up?
Yeah, definitely. He had to prepare the entire Grunfeld, and I'm sure that this was definitely not the only new idea he was ready to play. If Maxime would play something else after knight d7, he probably had to prepare a new idea.
Yeah, it's like move 7, queen a4, and as I said, I mean, c6 is possible, bishop d7, knight d7, queen d7, so at least 4 moves. Then later on after queen a3, it could be that black has not the only setup with b6, even though Maxime was playing this, but many other lines. Yeah, castle short, maybe. Okay, so obviously it does feel like knight a5 is not the move Mamedyarov was ready for.
Right, and while they're thinking, I would like to look back at the history, how both of the players have been playing so far, trying to qualify for the candidates. And what is quite amazing, actually, that Maxime has never managed to qualify for the candidates so far. It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I would say that last cycle he was very close in various ways to qualify. So he was close by rating. He was very close in the Grand Prix cycle. He missed, well, it was a question of one rapid game, drawing one rapid game in the World Cup. When he was leading, there was a tiebreak in the semi-final against Levon Aronian, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 10+10, where Maxime won the first game, and then Aronian leveled the score just to win some Armageddon game later on.
Yeah, so you can imagine how desperately Maxime wants to qualify for the candidates, because this is the age when you want to compete for the World Championship title, and so this is why he's so determined to make it happen. And still, I mean, this is his first real, I mean, not a real try, but he's definitely going to qualify for the candidates, while Shakhriyar, he has played already in the candidates. I might be mistaken, but I believe 3 times.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And the last candidates tournament, which was in 2019, he actually finished in the 2nd place behind Fabiano Caruana. So he is familiar with this, and actually, by the way, which is also quite important, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov plays here in the final. He is the winner of the previous cycle. Of the
previous Grand Prix,
right.
Yeah, of the previous Grand Prix cycle of 2018, it was, yeah?
No, 2017, 18, right.
Or, yeah, last tournament was in 17, and then 18, the beginning of 2018 was the candidates.
It's quite interesting, because in that cycle he did not win a single tournament. I believe he was placed 2nd and 3rd in one of those tournaments, and I believe the last tournament he played quite badly, but still he managed to secure the 1st place. And also, obviously, Maxime was quite high, but they did not win a single tournament. So
yeah, Maxime, I believe, yeah, well, if we speak about Maxime's possible ways to qualify for the last candidates as well, in the last leg of Grand Prix in Mallorca, I believe it was, in Spain, he had to win the last game against Yakovenko, and he would qualify. So he was that close in many, many different disciplines, but still, in the end, he failed to qualify. So, of course, he's desperately looking to... And Grand Prix Series seems to be still the most... Well, not the easiest, of course. There is no easy way to qualify unless you have a ding clearance rating of 28-something, and right. You manage to keep it. Because now it seems that Ding Liren, the Chinese player who is not taking part in this cycle, he will qualify by rating. Okay.
Yeah, because he never loses, right?
Yeah,
Almost never.
Absolutely. But anyway, so in this Grand Prix cycle, at least you can, prognose something, expect something. Because when you're to qualify from Grand Swiss, where Magnus is going to be playing, and it's 128 players in only one spot, from one tournament. That's very tough. World Cup, again, at least 128 players playing, at least like half of them are looking for a place in the semi-final final. Yeah, so,
yeah, you have to get in the final to qualify, to be sure. I mean,
so that's really tough.
So tough.
And now for Maxime, it goes exceptionally well, because that's the first tournament he is playing. That's 2nd for Shakhriyar, and 1st in Moscow went quite badly for him. He lost in round 1. For Maxime, it's the first tournament. He made it to the final, and as well, he got already 3 bonus points. So the winner of the tournament gets 8, And Shakhriyar, by winning Maxime by winning all 3 matches in classical time format, he's getting 3 bonus points. So
that's really amazing and quite important. And we also wish him the best of luck trying to finally to qualify for the candidates, because he's such a great player and he should be playing in the candidates.
Yeah, but what's interesting, it's only a second tournament, but unofficial match, and we will try to prepare the overall Grand Prix scores, but kind of unofficial match between the players, casters, commentators. We were discussing that. Strangely enough, it's a lot of players playing, but the pool of those who will qualify, it's quite limited already, because a lot of players had bad results. Like Aronian, for instance, as good player as he is, he was knocked out twice from round 1, and then doesn't matter what he does in the last tournament, he's unlikely to qualify.
I don't think it's even theoretically possible.
Maybe for him, it might be already theoretically impossible. So we have Jan Nepomniachtchi, the winner of Moscow Grand Prix, who didn't take part here. Apparently he is one of the favorites to qualify, and now if Maxime wins this final, he will be immediately, once again, recognized as one of the favorites. For Shach, I believe it's very important to win this final himself, because, as I said, that's already a second tournament of Grand Prix he is playing. In the first, he did quite badly.
Yeah, and also I dig some statistics before the match, and it was quite interesting that both of the players, at some point, they have joined the 2,800 club, and respectively, they are the 6th and 7th highest ranked players of all time. For Shakhriyar, it was the maximum rating was 2,820, reached September of last year, and for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave it was 2,819, reached in August in 2016.
Okay, so it was back then in 2016 when he was...
He was the second, I believe, the second ranked in the world.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, I don't really remember like any big tournaments won by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Maybe I sort of blundered a couple of
I actually wrote them down. He is obviously, his biggest achievement is probably winning the Sinquefield Cup of 2017.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So that was a big result.
Yeah, and Dortmund 2016. What's quite amazing that he has managed to win the Biel Grandmaster tournament 5 times.
Yeah, so 5 times winner of Biel Grandmasters, and I believe perhaps this involves winning the Biel Festival with Magnus Carlsen playing, yeah?
I do not remember, to be honest, but Magnus definitely has played there.
Yeah, I'm sure when Mamedyarov won it last year, there was, or was it the year before? It was the year before, right, in 2017. Mamedyarov won the Biel tournament when Magnus was playing there.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So, well, I would have to check it. It seems about right, yeah. And it's quite amazing that the battle between themselves have been going on for some time. They met each other back in 2000 and whichever year it was, 2005. When we were playing in Lausanne Young Masters tournament, when Maxime was only 15 years old and Shakhriyar was already 20 years old, and they met against each other in 2 games, and Shakhriyar actually managed to win both of them. So,
so it was 2-0 for Shakhriyar. Yeah, this Lausanne Young Masters, that was a great tournament. I believe Magnus was playing at some point, and then a lot of those top grandmasters who are nowadays top grandmasters, they were playing in those Young Masters knockouts, I believe. Right. There were knockout tournaments. So, which actually, looking back at this, yeah, I'm thinking, what's so surprising about 1985?
Well, definitely. I mean, this is where the preparation ended.
Yeah, this is where the preparation ended. But
I'm sure he had some ideas how to continue here. I mean, potentially he had prepared some ideas where to position the pieces, and now he is just trying to work them in earnest and try to understand what is the best continuation. But well, perhaps this is also one of those situations when you think, well, okay, I should have checked it more further because my opponent is still such a, how how to say it, a principal player who always goes for the main lines and is not scared to play Grunfeld over and over. And well, okay, but still, Shakhriyar has to work on the board, and I think Rook B1 with the idea of Bishop B5 looks very appealing.
Yeah,
Rook C1 makes sense.
Yeah. Could it be the opposite? So, in fact, this position is prepared, but it's once again, that's a sideline, and he was mainly expecting knight to d4. And could it be that White actually has two different plans, both of them promising something, but let's say not objectively leading to the advantage? And now it's time to choose, let's say, to go for Rook B1, Bishop B5, or Rook C1, Knight E5, or could it be that this somehow works? Once again, we don't know.
Right.
Right?
Well, okay, Knight E5, I could not really imagine how it would work immediately.
So once again, we
check this line.
take. Yeah, and
perhaps. No, but Shak is going to make a move, Rook C1, okay. Well, perhaps you're right. He was choosing between the plans and trying to understand which is the best continuation.
okay,
well,
so
C1 makes more sense, obviously.
Rook A to C1, and it shouldn't really. Oh well, so Shak leaves the board, and this means no one's on stage at the moment. I believe they taking shifts in the players' rest area with coffee, tea, snacks, as well as big screens on which you have the game itself. So Maxime immediately walks back at the board. Well, the feeling is like you cannot avoid playing one of the rooks to c-file.
Well,
because Rook c7 is too annoying of a threat.
Rook A to c8 feels like some sort of positional mistake, because after Knight E5, unless you play Queen D6, you don't have really great squares for the Queen. So yeah, Rook F to C8 was played quite automatically. Another question is, what happens in that line which we're actually looking for?
Yeah, Rook F C8, Knight E5, and we said, first of all, there is still this strange
Queen
move.
D6 with a potential exchange sacrifice.
Yeah, but if Queen D8 and indeed White goes for Bishop B5, isn't it just bad for Black? Or
well,
maybe there is some way to prevent Knight D6, of course, Knight C6. Yeah, this looks bad. This looked bad. Yeah, this Knight to C6, and then if Black would take everything, that this would really look quite bad.
Well, we can try to make it work. Something like after Knight. Still, it's not so clear after Queen D6 what is going on. Because
yeah, Queen D6. We just said that takes Knight C4. And we briefly looked at this Bishop A6 thing, yeah?
But that looks dangerous, doesn't it? I mean, we can yet again try to revisit it. Bishop A6, Knight takes on D3, right? That was the line we were looking at. After Bishop A6, Knight D3. Sorry, Knight takes on D6, I'm so sorry.
But what's that? Takes?
Knight C4, Bishop C4. We thought that should be slightly better for White. Although, perhaps it's not so...
Maybe it's
big
not
deal.
so big, yeah. Oh, wait, now the c-file is blocked, so can it be that I go Rook D8 now?
And Bishop B5?
Bishop B5, yeah, it is annoying.
Quite unpleasant, is it? I mean, because...
Somehow I'm not on time to do this. That's like one tempo short always.
Right.
Yeah, like if Bishop D4, Bishop C5 happens, then maybe still White is better. Yeah, that's the problem. It's not the position you are happy with, even if it holds somehow for Black. It's not the position you are happy with.
So Rook A to C8 should be better for White, right? Because you just take with the Rook on C8. Black has to guard the pawn on D6. You have to take with the Bishop.
Yeah, you have to take with the Bishop.
C1.
And then once again, Rook C1, and then similarly you can't stop Rook C7. And it might be just too much.
Yeah, but what are the other ways to protect the pawn on D6? Instead of
Rook D8, yeah?
Rook D8, Bishop F8 looks terribly passive.
It could be possible, though. But once again, White goes Bishop B5. I think this is the... I know. Could it be that in this case Rook C5
but this is worse. Rook takes on C5 should be...
you just take on C5.
Yeah, I think it's worse for Black.
Yeah, and this should be very dangerous to say the least because of the central pawns, or maybe just lost after Bishop C6. That's also a possibility. You have to take.
Right.
Now white takes, puts it on c7, and okay, I mean, you have to calculate stuff. I know, maybe you actually hold it, yeah? Bishop e7 and the king is running quickly. Could be.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it looks so dangerous. So,
yeah, but this position again. I mean, are you ready to play it?
No,
yeah,
I don't think Maxime is ready to play this position. So
yeah,
he's
looks terribly
looking for some
dangerous.
control.
Yeah, looks terribly dangerous. So after knight c4, there is the other option was this to go bishop a6, knight d6. Then you seemingly have to take on c1.
Yes, because bishop takes on d3, simply rook takes on c8, and white is
Or
pawn.
knight takes on
Or
c8,
knight takes,
yeah,
right.
bishop takes, king takes. Once again, the rook is not moving, the pawn is marching, white seems
That
to
is
be...
even better.
The white seems to be winning. So you have to take on no, not like that, yeah. Have to take on c1 and bishop a6. And this was the position we were very happy with for white. Maybe it makes sense for black to keep the rook alive, like to go rook c2, because it stops knight c8. It also, well, the active rook attacks the a2 pawn. Bishop is heading to d4. But once again, I'm not sure what kind of position is that. It could be, first of all, I'm not sure about e5 being the move, but that's a very straightforward approach. e5, e6, e7, queen.
Yeah, because essentially the knight on a5 is out of the game.
Yeah, knight is not moving. Knight is not moving, so it could be that white has to rush. It could be that white might play it slower, like rook d1 preventing, or seemingly preventing bishop d4. Yeah, prevent bishop d4, right? There is no bishop d4 because white simply takes and there is no back rank mate.
But Mamedyarov has made a move which I did not expect, really.
Wait, what's the rook c1, rook c8? And then Shah has played h3.
I wonder what is the idea.
Well, he covers g4.
It's not like it was actually threatening.
Yeah, it was not. So sure. It wasn't like queen g4 was a threat. Yeah, well, creates a square for the king. Does it mean that he's happy with this position as is? Does it mean that he's essentially trying to say that the knight on a5 is out of the game? The idea of knight e5 is not running away from me. Maybe I'm not in that much of a hurry.
I think you're right, because I think his point must be if black swaps the rooks takes on c1, rook c1 on rook c8, then presumably he can just take on c8. You cannot take with the queen.
Yeah, because e7 is hanging.
Unless the queen is trapped. No, it's not trapped.
No,
I mean, you can just play it.
Well, can always go queen h4. So after rook c8, black will have to take with the bishop.
And only then you play knight e5.
And then you play knight e5.
And that must be the idea, because now queen d6 looks so dangerous, because you
queen
can just
d6 should be terrible. Yeah, takes, and we go to c6 or...
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we go to c6.
So knight c6 looks great, and it forces some sort of unpleasant endgame. So perhaps h3 is a very smart waiting move.
Yeah, we'll see.
So we were just trying to punish black immediately for playing the Grunfeld and rook c1, knight e5, and trying to force the resignation. But perhaps h3 is a very nice preparation move. I mean, not often it happens. Not often it really works so well by just giving a tempo for the opponent, but perhaps this is the case.
Yeah, and black pieces are really arranged in such a strange way. This bishop on b7 not doing much. So I would really be looking for some sort of e7, e6 for black. But again, it's probably too dangerous. Can this be... Anyway, I mean, we can consider this move at least, right?
But that would involve some sort of pawn sacrifice for white. Something like after knight e5, I would imagine. And now there is no queen d6.
There is also this thing, which is, once again, it's
That's even simpler.
Maybe it's just good. It's not very often that you just play d6 and the line ends, because usually in Grunfeld, I mean, black tries to... But now this pawn it's alive, yeah, it's alive on d6. Then probably e6 is not even a move. The other line would be knight e5, but this I wasn't necessarily sure, right? Takes... And then, who knows?
Somehow checkmate on the long diagonal.
Yeah, maybe white just wins with a move like bishop a1 and then putting the bishop to, putting the bishop here, the queen here, creating a battery. Maybe black goes d4, So that's not this one. This one actually should be super bad after queen b2, yeah. But d4 instead. But yeah, but essentially e6 doesn't seem to be a move at all, because white has this option and then all the benefits plus the advanced passed pawn on d6. So is it good or bad? But the feeling is black has to trade on c1, put the other rook on c8.
Well, what are the other options? I don't know, perhaps something like f5. Can you try to make it work? But that looks so strange.
Yeah, once again, I mean, when the pieces are this coordinated, I mean, it's really, really hard to imagine that something like this is going to work.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be possible with the rook on f8, perhaps. But with rook on c8 already, f5 doesn't really make sense. Try to destroy the center. So what else is there? I mean, you
maybe
have to
this move. Maybe this move. So I'm preparing. I'm protecting the e7 pawn, so that if white once again says pass, I'll be able to trade, go rook c8, take with the queen, because it doesn't matter. On knight e5, I was never taking with this bishop, right? Maybe now I can actually consider queen d6 or just queen d8. So that bishop on f8, that's an X-ray on this queen on a3. Maybe one day I'll be able to play e6. So as an idea. I'm not saying that I like playing bishop f8 in such positions, but Maxime really needs to do something.
But it's not in Maxime's style to play so passively, right? Bishop f8, he wants to play actively, at least solve the problems in a dynamic way. And bishop f8 is really
feels terrible,
counterintuitive, right?
So I believe if there is sort of a normal way where black is still fighting for equality, it has to be takes and rook c, the other rook to c8. Those look like logical moves. Otherwise, that means, I mean, if you do something else, that means you've lost the opening battle, your position is worse, and then you're trying to somehow minimize the damage. I mean, moves like bishop f8, for instance, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm not ready to resign. Yeah, so it's better defend the pawn and then try to figure out what happens. But this seems to be principle. And rook takes, and again, rook c8 is needed. So what did we say? Takes.
Yeah, well, I assume it's queen c8 is impossible, right? Queen e7 ends the variation.
Yeah, this seems to be terrible, yeah, because queen takes, and even if you try to, well, it's never going to work. Yes, I'm trying to activate the pieces because there is always queen e8 check followed by bishop d6 or bishop h6. It's essentially just a pawn down. Now, I think he has to take with the bishop. Here, however, could it be that...
Maybe he can take on e5 and then try to escape in a worse endgame?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Could it be that he's going to take and, say, play some f6? But again, in some positions you can do that. But then at least your pieces have to be somewhat better placed. But not here.
Maxime just played. He played e6, which we thought it is
bad.
The
move that we said is not very appealing.
But still it is in his character to play actively in the defense. So e6 in that, from that point of view makes perfect sense. But the question is what happens after?
What happens after d6? That's a big question. Yes, you can bring your knight back, I mean, if you like, yeah. But other than that, I don't really see any achievements for black. Now, I'm afraid he's got a very, very suspicious position. What do you do after d6? Point being that now white actually does threaten knight e5, and when you take bishop takes, it's like all the dark squares around your king are weak.
Right, and Shak is ready to make a move. I mean,
yeah, it felt like Shakhriyar is not in, well, is not in
It must be d6. I mean, knight e5, I wasn't so sure because of this mentioned line after bishop e5, bishop e5.
Bishop takes on it.
Takes
d5?
And then d4, close the bishop. And I was not sure if white can actually claim something because you cannot take with white on d5 naturally.
Yes, a black takes, then attacks the bishop on e5 and threatens mate himself. And yeah, and logically you would try to build the battery like this with queen b2 next move, but then black goes d4.
Yeah, d4 and knight c6, closing the bishop, and eventually...
So you'll get the pawn back, I mean, there's no surprise, but to claim that white is better, really, it's not so easy. d6, however, seems to be a very tempting move, and so far No obvious drawbacks.
Well, at least black gets the control of the c6 square, so after d6, the knight from a5 can jump back into action after something like knight c6 or a move later. So I'm pretty sure he's going to play d6. I do not see any other alternative. Yes, d6 is played.
d6 played. So now it's up to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to prove that black does have resources, because, as I said, well, my sort of first worry would be, what do I do after knight e5?
What do you do after, let's say, black plays f6? Can you do this?
f6, yeah, that's...
My great idea was that if white actually plays e5, then I can just take on f3. Is this possible?
Yeah, bishop f3. Not that this is a very attractive position,
It's not.
right? But it does seem to be possible. Yeah, bishop f3, and then white could try to take on f6, but yeah, can white do something else? Otherwise, black is planning to play e5.
Yeah, black wants to play e5, bishop f8. I want to target that pawn. I can then play bishop c6, knight b7, and just I have to eliminate this pawn.
Yeah,
So
this knight goes here, attacking d6, bishop goes here, attacking d6, black plays e6, e5.
right.
Yeah, there is a feeling that white will have to play e5. Okay, the question. Black takes here, g
Obviously,
takes
g takes on f3
immediately.
is the first move you calculate, and f takes an e5 from bishop g5. And what
Yeah,
is this?
something like bishop g5. So that we put the bishop on e4, and this other one, if needed, will go to e7.
Well, perhaps this calls. I don't know, but it looks really
Bishop
suspicious.
f8. Could be that black just holds. Bishop f8, how do we guard this thing?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Perhaps something like bishop e7 I was looking at, but perhaps this pawn just falls on e7.
Yeah, bishop e7, then he takes. Then I would probably try to swap, just to get rid of those rooks and go rook e8. And
Yeah, there's
if,
nothing for
Yeah,
white.
if queen e7 happens next move, then black is more than happy.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's not as straightforward as it seemed, yeah?
Okay, I mean, after bishop takes on f3, you can also take on f6, right? I mean, f6, e5.
Bishop f3
can
and to
take on
try to
f6.
do this. Yeah. Because now, keeping this bishop, letting white to take on g7 would mean that the pawn on d6 is here to stay. Yeah, like, say, playing bishop d5, for instance, white takes. This should be terribly bad.
All right.
So what you do, you take on f6, or you... Well, if you're brave enough, you can try to play bishop g2 intermediate, but this looks, once again, a tempo is worth much more than this pawn in this position, it seems. So you probably do this, and then don't know if e5 works. Or maybe it's nothing special, I just moved the
I don't
bishop,
think it
yeah.
works. Yeah, bishop
Because-
g3 and bishop e4 follow.
Yeah, you don't really care about this h3 pawn. The king is safe. So the whole question for black, is he on time to take on d6 or not? And in this particular line, it doesn't seem to be the case. Because a move like knight b7, for instance, attacking d6, this time white is just on time to play bishop e4. If queen d6, there is a check on b3, and then knight on b7 falls. So the white perhaps wins an exchange like within the next couple of moves. Or just holds the pawn on d6. Anyway, that promises us a very, very interesting game. So the conflict is clearly on. It seems that Mamedyarov is getting somewhere with this d6.
Well, it's probably not so bad for black. I mean, comparing to that endgame we were looking at previously, rook to c8 did not... exchanging the rooks on c1 and then playing rook c8 did not really look so appealing, because white was getting very straightforward position. At least here there is some sort of conflict going on.
Yeah, speaking of exchanging the rooks, can this be played now? I understand the d pawn is very dangerous and stuff, but can this be? Rook c1 and then rook c8 again. Because if we are getting rid of the rooks, then maybe black king can help stopping the d pawn. And still white is Well, he can play e5, but it's not like it ends the game immediately.
Yeah, but that's so super dangerous, isn't
This
it? I mean,
seems dangerous, of course, yeah.
I mean, you have to take on f3, I would imagine, because some
Yeah, like
knight
even
G5
knight d4,
or
bishop
knight
b5,
D4.
knight g4, knight e4, yeah, so we take here.
But I can imagine this
then,
being fun
yeah.
position to play for black.
Yeah, this e5, black is never on time to get to e5 pawn, yeah. No, this is terrible. This is terrible. f6 seems to be practically only move.
At least visually speaking. I mean, okay, might be some other move as knight c6 perhaps.
Knight c6 back, but then it's once again it allows me to play e5, yeah?
Yeah, and Maxime is going to play f6, I think.
Yeah, he's reaching for an f-pawn.
I mean, nothing else makes really sense judging how the game was proceeding. Essentially, you play e6, you are ready that your opponent is going to play d6, and you had to be ready for that, and you had to be ready to execute the move f6. Still, Maxime was sort of hesitating doing this, and most likely he was checking the lines. And I would imagine it also forces for white to play e5.
Well, there might be other moves, in fact. Now that I'm looking at it, there might be some tactical possibilities for white. I have no idea of, you know, what kind of, but let's say, can I all of a sudden try this? So that if it's a quiet game, maybe I'm hoping for knight b5, knight c7. If black plays e5, then something like this starts. Bishop b5. The queen is attacked. In case of queen d8, knight e6 traps the queen, so queen f7. And then let's say d7. Who knows what's that?
Well, certainly not me.
Probably I'm not promoting this pawn, but still, I mean, it's like it's a crazy position, it seems. If rook takes, then the knight is probably not the piece you're taking because there is bishop c7, right? So you take the bishop. And the question is if white has like one last resource to add to when queen d6 threatening d8 and then knight e6 to follow might be enough, might be not enough. So of course something to calculate for both sides. Yeah, queen d6, now d8 is threatening, rook d8, knight e6 seems to be winning for white, but there is queen d8 for instance, and then if you trade, bishop takes, knight e6, bishop e7, still the game is not over because black pieces are so terribly placed, so some rook c7, this goes on. So of course there is something for Mamedyarov to calculate after f7, f6, which was played by the way. But yes, you're absolutely right that the first thing you try to make work is e4, e5 break.
But I mean, knight e4 would be in Mamedyarov's spirit because he's such a creative and dynamic player. Who was it who once said this very nice quote? Was it Petr Svidler who said, if Mamedyarov wasn't invented, you'd have to reinvent him or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, he's such an amazing and creative player, and so I wouldn't be really surprised if he would come up with such a resource as knight e4, but still this leads to very complex battle.
Yeah, those are very complex positions. And the other thing I'm thinking about, how bad is to allow black to play e5, because we were trying to make e5 work. It's not, I mean, it's not clear like 100%. We are not sure if e5 is the move you're playing. And then my question would be, what happens if white says, okay, let me try to play it slow. Let me move the bishop to d2 so that I have bishop b4 to defend the pawn, yeah? So the only problem is that after e5, this knight is sort of left out of the game, yeah?
Yeah,
but maybe it is a serious problem.
Well. Yeah, it is definitely, because knight on f3, bishop d2, bishop d3, they are not exactly optimally placed for this position. So it's either e5 or knight d4 indeed. I mean, knight d4, we can try to make it work. But
so once again, let's try to... Knight d4, now that I'm thinking more of it, I mean, once again, I'm not sure if all those funny lines work after e5, but if black doesn't want any funny lines, if black plays a6 and then planning to play e5 next move, maybe white simply doesn't have antidote to this. Because p5 is very important to guard, right?
Right.
Knight b3, I was thinking, like if the knights are traded, then I'm probably happy because attack b6 and...
But I mean, essentially, this makes no sense to play knight e4, knight b3, to trade the knight on a5, which is doing exactly nothing.
And I'm afraid black might actually not agree to trade, but just to go knight c6. And then the knight on b3 is super stupid.
I mean, it must be e5.
Yeah, the feeling is like white has to play e5.
So the big question is, what happens after e5? I mean, does black take on
e5
f3?
and bishop f3, right?
I think so. He has to take on f3 because naturally, I mean, excluding the possibilities here, after e4, e5, what do? You don't play f5. I mean, you can just strategically resign pretty much after f5.
That's too much. Yeah, well, there are some positions when they actually do, but then it would be with black having the pawn on c5, white having the pawn on c3, and then black has some really, really long-term plan of surrounding the e5 pawn. Yeah. Here, it's not happening.
And of course, Shak immediately played d5. This is a very natural move. So the question is, what Maxime plays after? No, I mean, I'm a bit curious what happens after bishop takes on f3. I believe we are going to see it on the board because I cannot imagine playing a different move.
What else?
What else? I mean, f takes on e5 makes no sense. Knight e5 is just...
Well, like coming back to c6, but then you no longer have this idea of taking on f3. And if any possible quiet move is answered with takes on f6, then knight e5, and once again, black is close to resignation.
Right.
So bishop f3, is it good or bad? It has to be played. But there is a feeling white might have an option, you know, for some tactical trick somewhere around this moment. Like bishop a6. No, bishop will
b7.
be moved.
I mean, I can only imagine e takes on f6 might be important.
Takes, for instance, so that it's white to move. I really like the fact that white has to move here. Like, for instance, I take here. I don't know what I'm trying to achieve. No, that's stupid, yeah.
Or bishop a6 is stupid. I don't know.
Bishop a6, yeah. That was essentially the thing I was looking at.
Right.
Bishop a6, and I can take with the bishop. This I've completely forgotten.
No, I mean, I had a very deep idea that after rook c1, you take with the rook on c1 and then sacrifice the bishop and do something on the 7th rank. But, I mean, this is ridiculous, probably.
Takes. Well, who knows? Because the knight is out of play. That's for real, right? Rook c7, he goes to d8.
Well, it's not clear what white actually has.
No, maybe, yeah. Maybe the queen is not getting the... Knight is out of the game, but black might, you know, bring the bishop to c5 or just bishop e5, bishop f8, yeah. I
mean, Shak is definitely such a creative player, but definitely he wants to keep things under at least some sort of control. So he's not gonna gamble. This is not a blitz game. This is the final of Riga Grand Prix. You want to play solid, good, and dynamic chess, and what do? I mean, after bishop takes on f3, I think you take on f6. I mean, or g takes, f takes, and do something else.
Yeah, could be that the plan is to take on f6, and then we said bishop takes, white takes over here, and then black has to come up with something. Can it be knight b7? Can it be... Yeah, I mean, essentially, I would really love this knight to be on c5, so that's actually white knight b7. But not sure if black is getting there.
I think it's safe to conclude that Mamedyarov holds the upper hand after the opening.
Yeah, this looks very promising for white, and so far let's say, we failed to spot any position where black starts all of a sudden playing for a win, even if, say, in some lines we were... No, not this one. In some lines we were sacrificing some pawns for white, and still it felt like black is only trying to equalize, is only trying to, you know, to get enough counterplay. Black basically never plays for a win.
All right, so bishop takes on f3 must be the move unless... I mean, what else he can do?
Well, Maxime is still thinking, so...
He's probably just not happy. I mean, he's not happy the way he played out at the opening and the way he solved his problems. Perhaps he's having second thoughts about the move e6.
Can this be... I mean, if he's thinking for such a long, I mean, it has to have some explanation. Knight c6...
So your idea is that after bishop b5 you want to play a6, right?
Well, perhaps, yeah.
Well, it makes sense that wants to get rid of the
is quite annoying, yeah, so right. a6.
Although that position as well is not so clear. For example, bishop takes on c6, whatever takes on c6, and I take on f6, followed by knight
just
e5.
take
This
here.
is also terrible.
Yeah, and then we are getting this position that we described as strategically close to lost. Yeah, knight e5, you'll have to take, and this pawn is here forever. Whenever you move the bishop, you have to reckon with rook c7. That's
I think at that level you can resign this position.
Not to mention that one day or another, bishop a1, queen b2 finishes the game.
Right.
Or just bring the queen. No, that's terrible. Yeah, I agree.
Doesn't look like
Agree,
okay, but it's forced,
terrible.
right? Isn't it? I mean, after knight c6, bishop b5.
Bishop b5. If I'm playing a6, it's forced.
But what else do you do? I mean, because this threat to take on
nothing.
c6, take on f6, and knight e5.
Yeah.
It looks logical, unless somehow black manages to build the battery of the bishop on b7, queen on c6, so that white
So that
has
the knight
no time.
cannot jump. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't see how it could happen actually.
This is
terrible.
This prevents White's knight's appearance on e5, but that's the only achievement. Other than that, you can resign. I mean, looks bad, but it seems bishop f3 is the only way to continue for black. Maxime is seriously not happy about the position, but he's the one to blame.
Right. I mean, but what else he could have played? I mean, e6, of course, we felt that wasn't exactly a good move, but I would imagine that Maxime was not exactly impressed with his other options.
E6 is the Maximish move, I would say. So he wants to solve the problems in, let's say, in a principal way, and that's the only principal way is available, right? Because otherwise we were looking at options to trade the rooks, playing some this war's position on this war's position. Now after e6, it might be terribly bad for black, or it might just work and black equalizes. And we are still not 100% sure what's happening. So f6, again, principal move, threatening to play e5 and then cut White's knight out of the game. e5, once again, principal moves. They're both playing very, very principal moves. And this means bishop takes f3 is another principal move, and it has to be played by Maxime.
I mean, bishop takes on f3 is simply a defensive measure because White simply wants to take on f6 and play knight e5
As
afterwards.
we figure out, it's just a threat, right? So we take on f6, we go knight e5, and
unless
it's really bad for black.
He sort of wants to build some kind of fortress. Bishop takes on f3, but I can imagine that being a fortress.
So bishop f3 takes. Yeah,
takes
that's what
and
we
bishop
said.
takes on f6, g takes, and now sort of somehow secure the queen side. But how do you do it? I mean,
bishop a6 is a very annoying move to face. Maybe really knight b7 here, so that if White plays bishop a6, at least black can trade on c1 and jump to c5. Yeah.
Well, that would be okay, but what about bishop e4?
We have to look for a move for White in this position.
Right.
Yeah, bishop e4. Once again, unpleasant pin, plus potentially rook c7 is an issue in some positions. Let's say I take, rook takes, yeah. Rook c8, I might as well resign after queen a7, yeah. Rook c8. Perhaps not the only move, but the queen a7, and that's it. Seems to be it, yeah. The d6 pawn survives.
Well, this looks terrible, but what else?
Yeah, it does look terrible. Maybe the move... e5. Is that what we said? e5 first, and then we were saying bishop g3. By the way, I'm not even sure about that one. Maybe I would prefer to keep the bishop somewhere else, but then I will have to, in some position, we'll have to worry about queen h3 and possibly at least some perpetuals, right? As long as after e5 bishop goes to g3, at least the king is safe.
Right.
But maybe now, with d6 pawn being hanging, maybe this becomes playable in some versions. It's again, not sure which one.
Yeah, but I mean, this makes perfect sense, and the question is, what else? What else do you do? You have to do something. I mean, you cannot allow e takes on f6 and knight e5. You have to take on f3.
So even like if it's not full equality, even if you are not happy, but what to do? Yeah.
What else do you do? I mean, I do not exactly see a choice here for black. I mean, maybe
he found
this is the position we're looking at. I mean, bishop f3, e takes on f6, which we were just looking some short time ago. So here take on f6, bishop f6, g takes on e5. And somehow pray that the pawn on d6 falls, but even if it falls, I mean, white has these two powerful bishops, and the white king is, I'm sorry, the black king is exposed, but yeah, but there might be just no other choice.
Yeah. Say if bishop goes to g3...
And now we have to try to make this knight b7 somehow to
Knight b7, or can it be that this is the moment I'm trying to swap both rooks? There's this and rook c8. So in the worst case, I'm controlling the d8 square, so that if, say, white trade somehow manages to push the pawn to d7, looks like a disaster if I'm honest, but maybe at least I'm keeping it on d8.
Right.
Say bishop b5. But again, if bishop b5, if this thing appears on the board, bishop on b5, pawn on d7.
But I don't see what else. I mean, okay, what if black plays instead of the rook c8, rook d8, try to take the pawn, but then you can just play rook d1 as well. I mean, there's not even a threat. Or is there a threat? Can you take on d6? Can you actually
do d6?
Can you actually do this? I think
bishop b5? You can do it. That's tricky. Check here, knight takes, attacks the queen, and when rook d6, we take the queen and the rook on d8 is protected, right? So in fact, it's black who can take... So we found some line.
At least something.
So e5, bishop goes, then we said, yeah, it makes sense, of course, to trade a pair of rooks and to go rook d8. Where white seemingly can't defend the d6 pawn.
Well, I mean, white always can play for the positional sacrifice and play something simple as bishop e4, give up the pawn on d6, and then penetrate the back rank with the rook c7. I mean, that would be my minimum variation, which I would be looking at, and I would definitely...
trade rook c7, yeah.
Although it's not clear, maybe there's nothing really.
Yeah, but black, I mean, if queens are traded, black is not so scared.
Right.
Black is not so scared. And then I'm starting to regret I put my bishop on g3.
Right.
Because it's
but what
not
else
doing
is there?
much,
I mean, after rook d8, what can you else do? So you need to keep the pawn somehow on d6. So how do you do it?
The other thing, we gave up on this variation pretty quickly, right? Maybe gf3 will follow. Because after all, do we really care how many pawns are there on e-file, yeah? Maybe not.
And maybe now bishop g3 is essentially the
That's
same.
like bishop g3, and we are trying to go for the same line with black. Yeah, rook d8, attack d6.
By the way, Maxime took on f3, like we predicted. There's just no other choice.
Bishop f3 is on the board, so now for Mamedyarov, it's well, seemingly a choice between taking on f6 or taking on f3 immediately, and we couldn't spot any other move.
So I think his decision already should be ready, because, I mean, normally you would expect that your opponent is going to take on f3. So yeah, and very quickly he took on f6.
Takes on f6, yep.
So at least so far, Shak is agreeing with us.
Yeah, so far we've managed to guess quite a few moves in this game. Well, starting after Maxime's e6, indeed. e6 was the most principal move which we were not expecting.
And he is back to the players' lounge. I mean, he very quickly executed the move, and he's back for the coffee.
And left.
Yet again, I do not see any real choice here for black.
Yeah, it's not like Maxime was not expecting a capture on f6.
Right.
So he has to take it quickly.
Bishop takes an f6. I do not see any intermezzo moves here. Yeah, so and I would imagine e5.
Yeah, here we said e5.
And perhaps this is where you rightfully said that perhaps bishop on g3 might be not so great move after all, and you would want to position the bishop somewhere more active. But then again, your king sort of becomes...
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, how dangerous is the threat of some perpetual checks? And by the way, did we give up on this? Like bishop a6, and if he takes, takes on c1. No, first of all, I have no clue what happens if they actually take on f4 and white trades everything on c8. That's one story. But even if they take bishop takes and rook d8, it doesn't seem to be... Oh, no, now it's different because there is nothing on the d file and white can protect the pawn, at least for now.
Right. But to be honest, I don't believe in this line.
It doesn't look so bad for black anymore, right? Some queen h3s. I mean, I'm actually looking at starting the whole thing with king g7.
I think after whatever bishop a6, black can just take on f4. I mean, I'm quite confident
just
this
to take
holds.
on f4, yeah.
Right, and maybe even more.
Like trade.
The d pawn is going anywhere.
Oh, well, actually, yeah, you're right. I mean, in the worst case, this square black can control 3 times.
Yeah.
So how on earth you promote this d pawn?
Yeah.
So this happened, ef6. There must be some alternative for Vachier-Lagrave because he already has spent quite substantial amount of time here.
Can it be he's really thinking about bishop takes on g2? That doesn't really make sense because those pawns on the f file, doubled or not, they won't really pay any difference. I would imagine it's just an extra tempo essentially for white. So in this position, we have essentially this position where white has the pawn on f3, and in this particular position where white doesn't, and he has an extra tempo. I do not think this pawn is really so relevant.
It might be just straight out bad. Bishop e4 attacking this thing, then in case rook b8, some rook c7.
Yeah,
it might be just this pawn just promotes, yeah.
Right,
or say you take on c1, rook takes on c1, rook c8, rook c7. Who knows? Maybe this pawn just queens.
So it must be he's checking the line further. I mean, he is ready to, I would imagine, play bishop takes on f6, g takes on f3. He is already considering what is he gonna do afterwards. I would imagine he's gonna play e5. He has to close the bishop.
Yeah, that's essentially the line we were looking at. Bishop takes, white doesn't have any intermezzo, so has to take the bishop on f3, and then e5 seems to be a critical position. And so far we couldn't really...
Maybe he can play bishop d4 instead of it. Can he try to do this? To position the bishop on c5. You mentioned this idea.
To block the... Yeah, well, that's one thing. The other thing is to block the d file. You have to play e5 next move, and then the bishop on d4 survives. It does seem to be dangerous, right? Because you give white extra option, or this way or another, to play rook c7. But yes, this is more ambitious try. Let's put it this way. So bishop d4 is an interesting option.
So this again leads to some forcing lines after bishop e4, I would imagine.
I like bishop e4 and what black has to do. For some reason I feel that this one is too much. Might be not, but the feeling is like this is too much because rook c7 you'll have to take that. Essentially one more tempo. The rook is hanging.
I was very shortly looking at some funny tactics because perhaps you can solve positional problems with a tactical approach after bishop e4 to play e5, sacrifice the exchange.
Play e5, bishop on a8.
And take on f4, and presumably there is some perpetual check, queen h3, queen g3, but I cannot imagine this being true. Probably not, just bishop d5.
Takes, and...
No, this is just losing it.
I'll just bring the queen, maybe queen d3 first, or bishop d5 check. Well, bishop d5 check, king g2 should be good enough. Yeah, should be good enough. Okay.
But I mean, bishop d4 looks like a sensible move, but still this gives white quite a lot of time. Quite a lot of extra time. So bishop d4, bishop e4, and yeah.
There's this. Let's say he takes now. Plays rook c8. We trade. And the question how to... Oh, well, I'm not sure about we trade because there is also rook c7, yeah?
Right. Well, rook c7 at least forces something. You take and play e5. And if there is no continuation, you can just play this.
This is winning. Because queen f8 mate, yeah.
It seems like it's winning.
I'd say it's strange because on one hand we want the bishop active on d4, but this line actually shows sort of the opposite. Yeah, that I mean it wouldn't be terrible to have the bishop here just to be able to guard the king. So now, for instance, bishop c5, how do we win? We declared this one to be winning. How do we win then? Queen d3.
Some beautiful win at queen a4. Is it possible? No.
Oh wow.
I don't know.
Oh wow. This is nice. Yeah, queen a4. Yeah, it does win because
There should be some checkmate.
yeah, no, it is like, well, bishop d5 first, just to make
Right.
sure the king goes in the corner, and then c8 rook, very important, not the
But
queen.
okay, I mean, it felt winning, right? I mean, it's a great move, obviously, but it felt winning, and there should be some sort of tactics.
Yeah.
So
Once again, my sense of danger says that you are not messing around in this position. You just play e5, make sure that the d6 pawn is targetable, the bishop is kind of cut away from protecting the d6 pawn,
Right.
not to allow white any rook c7 nonsense.
Well, obviously, I mean, Shakhriyar looks very confident. He is happy the game was heading. He managed to prepare a very nice novelty. His opponent played exactly what he prepared. Perhaps his preparation ended after Maxime did not play knight e4. We were actually speculating, was this possible or not? We could not exactly understand it. But after knight a5, definitely at least, it seemed that Shakhriyar was... I mean, he was not prepared any much further, and he was starting to work on the boards. I would imagine knight a5 computer was saying, okay, this is bad, so you have to work it out
Knight
yourself.
a5 was played, yeah, and then this was the moment Shakhriyar spent almost 18 minutes,
Right.
which kind of gives us an idea that perhaps he was awaiting for the other move being knight d4, because that seems to be the only sensible alternative to knight a5. So rook a to c1, rook f to c8, and, you know, kind of rewinding the whole story, it might turn out that, in fact, h2, h3 is not energetic enough, as it allowed black the whole thing with e6, f6. Once again, assuming that black's going to hold it, which I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not so sure.
Bishop
for me,
takes
me at
EF6.
least, visually speaking, e6 felt like a positional mistake. I don't know. At least the game is proceeding. I do not like this. I would probably choose something else instead. So this position, it might be just perhaps even strategically losing. Because if white manages to keep the pawn on d6, he has the two bishops, the knight on a5 is out of the game, so essentially it might be at some point just game over. So it felt like e6...
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong.
that's a very committal move, but at the same time, we had seen it not once or twice, but many more times, where one side enters, you know, strategically dubious or sometimes even like desperate-looking situation, by just because of the dynamics works this way. Like, once again, the line we were looking at. Bishop f6 takes, and then e5, and he's on time. For instance, in our line, yeah, takes. Once again, that was the funny line we have found.
Yeah, by the way, here we did not
works.
find any continuation.
Yeah,
anyway.
which seemingly works for white because for black, pardon, because d6 is hanging, and yeah, rook d1, which you would expect to be the refutation, doesn't really work. Black takes on d6, and after this check, he has knight takes c4.
Yeah, so what about this position? So after e5, bishop g3, can we actually find anything for white?
Bishop g3
Takes, and rook d8. Is there anything?
takes rook d8.
Because if there's not, you cannot
sure.
really play bishop g3, can you?
Yeah, that's the problem. So, I mean, I can assume that white is not worse after something like rook c7, trade here, keep the bishop, yeah? Just...
Bishop b5 or...
Bishop b5, yeah, to make sure that we are taking the a7 pawn. White shouldn't be worse. But does white play it for a win? Also hard to say. Will depend on the fact if a pawn survives or not.
Yeah, with the bishop on g3...
Somehow, yeah, this bishop now feels a bit misplaced.
Right.
Yeah, I would really prefer to have it, say, on e3 in this particular case, so that there will be some bishop h6s. Very disturbing move. I mean, if the bishop appears on h6, so that,
Right.
you know, some threats to this king.
And is there anything else? I mean, are we missing something after rook
After
d8?
rook d8,
Not clear. Because, yeah, rook c7 doesn't really allow me to keep the queens on the board, yeah. Other than that, yeah, I mean, the other thing could be that I move the queen, you take on d6, well, essentially something like this. Bishop e4, queen takes, and say queen a4, saying, okay, I've lost or sacrificed the pawn, and let's play on, basically. So, but it's not so clear, right?
Right. So that would mean, actually, that indeed white is not going to play bishop g3 and position the bishop somewhere else. Maybe bishop d2 instead of it.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, what move white has to play over there? Bishop d2 is here, bishop e3, while sacrifices do not seem to work.
I'm fairly sure this is exactly what Shak is trying to calculate right now. I mean, what happens? Because at that level, this line should be pretty much obvious. That after bishop g3 takes, rook d8, you cannot really play this rook d1, queen d6, bishop c4. So probably Shak and also Maxime, they are calculating what is happening after e5, because e5 is such a committal move. I mean, for example, you can imagine Maxime in his place.
Over here.
Yeah, if you play e5 and, for example, bishop d2, and suddenly you just don't recapture the pawn on d6, the pawn on h3 is irrelevant, you can pretty much perhaps even resign at some moment. So it's very important for him to try to understand this.
Takes.
And now,
what else? What do we do? Still play rook d8, for instance? That's a whole different story, because white has bishop b4, it seems, yeah?
Or also bishop takes on a5 also becomes an option.
Bishop a5, pawn takes, and then some checks, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like rook d1, for instance, here. Rook d1 saves the d6 pawn, because now there is a check from c4.
Although, let's not forget about the pawn on h3. I mean, this is something.
Yeah, queen h3, but
understand.
This is something I was thinking about. I mean, this might be, as you said, irrelevant. Like white, for instance. I mean, I'm not sure if I need this check. Probably I don't. I just take a5. Again, rook d6 loses to this.
What just happened there? I mean, Maxime stood up and then he sat down.
And he's still thinking.
I mean, he was just standing. He just stood up for a couple of seconds, then he sat down. That was
I don't know. The thing is that he's still thinking over here in the position where we failed to find any sensible alternative for him. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm starting to suspect that this position has much more to offer than we actually see. Once again, I have no idea what exactly.
Or he is just unhappy with the outcome. I mean, if you calculate something, for example, we calculate this line, and then in the end he sees this position is terrible. He sees no alternative. So essentially, you're just staring at the board and looking what other options are there, and perhaps he just cannot find it. But still, I mean, it's not clear exactly.
Yeah, the point is that at some point, you know, at some moment, you just come to the conclusion, yeah, I can't do anything else. Yes, the position sucks, but I can't do anything else. Bishop takes f6 was played.
So I would imagine we are going to see g takes on f3, e5 played very quickly. We did not manage to find any alternatives, and the question is, what is exactly e5 is played on the board? So the question is, where is the bishop going? Bishop g3, we failed to find solid advantage for white, if any at all, after rook c1,
yep,
rook c1.
That was a problem, yeah. Rook takes and rook to d8.
Right. So I would imagine, I mean, you have to position the bishop elsewhere, but where? But where do you position him? I mean, the logical choice would be bishop d2.
Yeah, bishop d2 in order to try to take this knight.
And still, I mean, the same idea might be playable for black. I mean, you can swap at least one rook on c1, because the other rook on a8 is doing nothing really to contribute for black. So let's say here, bishop d2, I would imagine.
And
so
we still take.
Yeah, we can still try to take this, take, and rook d8. And what is this?
Rook d8. And then we said we take and get rook
I'm not
d1,
sure. I mean,
yeah?
if you have to take on a5.
Maybe we don't have to take on a5.
I have no idea. I mean, because the pawn on h3 is still hanging. That's,
well, technically I protect it like that, funny enough. Rook d1, despite there are two bishops on d-file, it sort of saves the d6 pawn for now. Because if black somewhat naively takes on d6, white trades here, takes on a5, and follows it up with bishop c4 check.
That's a nice idea.
But that's a funny trick, but does white have enough in this moment to guard the d6 pawn?
I mean, you can take
maybe
always
he
queen
still
a7.
does, yeah?
Somewhere,
well,
no?
at the very least, I can take on a7, which once again will be unclear. Yeah, you're right.
It looks
Queen
better.
a7, yeah, because queen d6, I have a check with queen b7 to follow. And knight d6, to be honest, it seems that I'm very happy with an endgame, right?
Right.
So just takes, bishop b4, bishop e3 might actually win this pawn already. b5 being bishop takes b5.
Right.
Rook b7, bishop. Yeah, well, this if some endgame like this happens, like black is dreaming of holding that's the maximum black can achieve, and there is no guarantee whatsoever because white has two powerful bishops and essentially.
White does not really want to take the knight on a5 because then the d pawn essentially is going nowhere, I would imagine. So here, let's say if black actually swaps the rooks and plays rook d8, so I would expect I think you're absolutely correct.
Rook d1 and
d1.
not
what
to
happens
take,
after queen h3? You still need to understand this. Queen h3 and
but
bishop
there
e4.
is no threat, huh?
And bishop
Could it
e4,
be
it's
that
amazing.
there is no, like bishop e4 or bishop, who knows, b5?
Or bishop b5. But bishop e4 looks like a safe move. You just bring the bishop closer to your king, and there are no checks.
There is no knight c4 because there is always bishop d5 check or queen b3 pin. Yeah. This would be some funny position. Yeah, black returns back, says, okay, at least this pawn is not running yet. And to assess...
Maybe it's not so bad after all. Because, at least there is no immediate way how the white pawn is advancing forward.
I mean, once again, perhaps we have to mention that something like this, it's white who is trying because of very strong passed pawn, but at the same time, the king is somewhat weakened. And this pawn can get to d7, but it's really hard to imagine really hard to imagine that this pawn will ever get to d8. Yeah, so well, three pieces to guard d8. So the rook itself, the bishop on f6, and potentially the queen.
How are the players doing with the clock? Because I see Shakhriyar still has 1 hour on the clock, so that must feel really nice.
And it's half an hour left for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who has spent quite a lot of time on his capture on f6.
Right. It must be bishop d2. I mean, bishop g3 did not exactly work. Bishop e3 looks strange. Well, maybe bishop e3 is playable, by the way, as well.
Yeah, this one we didn't check just yet, but bishop e3... wait a sec, same thing. He takes over here, he goes rook d8, and on
there
the
is
same
no rook d1.
On the same trick
Right.
that he can actually take on d6.
So it must be
he's
bishop
holding.
d2. But is it so obvious from afar? Okay, obviously Shakhriyar being one of the world's best players, he's definitely going to find the idea after bishop d2 takes rook d8 and rook d1. It is absolutely not an obvious move, but probably he's even checking further if black takes the pawn on h3.
I believe for him it will be no problem to find. I'm guessing, could it be that in case of bishop d2, so, the d file is getting more and more blocked, could it be that black can actually try something else? Like, don't know, takes, and even, well, I know it's ugly looking.
But it loses outright.
It loses outright, yeah. There is, I keep forgetting there is a check here.
Yeah.
Queen b3 check, yeah. And then takes the knight. Yeah, I was trying to, to change something in black's behavior so he's not always playing the same line, but it's not so easy. Yeah, bishop d2 seems to be the most challenging thing.
Right. So it's probably this endgame we are going to see. I mean, okay, rook takes on c1 is not mandatory. Okay, he could play rook d8 immediately. Maybe
rook
it
d8
is possible.
immediately, yeah, but then it keeps my rook on c file,
and then you can play
which
rook
I'm very
F.
happy with. Yeah?
Then you can play rook f
rook
to
f
d1.
to d1.
Right, the same idea.
And this still doesn't really work because, or maybe, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, queen takes, rook takes, bishop to a5. Then I paused for a bit thinking of intermediate rook d8 attacking the bishop, but there is still check, exchange on d6, and then the bishop leaves from a5.
Right.
So basically on the same tactic, bishop a5, ba5, bishop c4, white wins in this case. That means this d6 pawn is not possible to take, and white is already threatening rook c7. White can hope to guard the... Well, essentially, it has no benefits, it seems, this move rook c to d8. Yeah.
I mean, at least from a strategic point of view, it absolutely makes no sense to play rook f to c8, and then rook c8 to d8, and then only rook a8 to c8. So it makes perfect sense. If you played with the rook f to c8, then you have to swap off the rooks and play the other rook wherever it goes.
The question is, can I try to take on h3? Sort of ignoring what's going on the queen side, just take the pawn and...
So bishop e4?
Bishop e4.
And the rook is under attack.
That's what we said.
That's essentially the same, I think.
Yeah. Bishop e4, so let's say now I'm taking rook d8. Which is once again, very hard to believe, but... No checks still. If only I would be able to get rid of this pawn, then some bishop d4 is actually...
Well, I cannot really imagine for white to take the knight on a5 because it's such a terrible piece, and the bishop on d2 controls so many squares, not to mention some later additions as bishop g5, bishop f4, and you can actually cause some trouble. So the bishop on d2 is not only...
so we are not exchanging, yeah?
I don't think so. I cannot imagine. I'm not sure even if this is forced line because we're looking at it from a different perspective with the rook on d1, I think. Yeah, instead of queen takes on h3, at least I think the black forces white to play rook d1. Takes, rook d8, rook
d1.
Yeah, we've sort of forced to play rook d1, queen h3, and now this is the critical position.
And then white's to move, yeah?
Yeah. Maybe in this position, let's say something like after bishop e4, wherever we stopped at the line, something like queen d7, then you said that, and the white has to prove whatever he has.
Yeah, could it be, yeah, bishop d2 is played. Here I'm not actually... not 100% convinced that this is so bad. I mean, maybe I'm actually taking... well, check, you have king g7, yeah? Yeah, queen a5, even queen f3 is possible. No, you're right. We have to put the bishop on e4. We have to put the bishop on e4 and then
somehow
see
try
what
to
happens.
Use the two bishops, but is this enough?
Might not be, yeah. It's not so easy to get the king g7, you know, to get rid of all those nasty checks. Perhaps even planning to jump to c4 in some positions.
And maybe this is actually how white plays. Something like now you play rook c1, rook c7, you try to activate the pieces somehow. After queen d7, I don't think the bishop a5 is going to happen.
So queen h3, and if king g7, let's say rook to
like
c1,
rook c1
trying to get it to c7.
Yeah, and the knight on a5 is still out of the game. So this looks
actually
dangerous.
King g7 was terrible. King g7 was terrible.
So what about something more active as queen?
Maybe queen back, or maybe queen e6.
No, queen e6 loses immediately. You take on a5.
You take on a5, yes.
So you have to play queen d7, I would imagine.
Queen d7.
And now, something. I don't know what.
Something, yeah, that's the problem, because I'm not getting this thing to...
Bishop e3.
Oh, bishop b4.
Bishop b4
maybe.
Is bishop g5.
Yeah, now I'm allowing bishop g5. Yeah, so my idea essentially is to try to bring the rook to c7, in the right moment, under the right circumstances. So can this be the move then? Bishop h6, or just bishop e3, maybe.
I mean, if you're looking from AlphaZero's perspective, for example, would AlphaZero actually care about the pawn?
White is winning.
White is winning, right?
I mean, sure.
I can position the king from g1 at some moment to e2, so that there are no checkmate ideas on the king side, and then presumably use my passed pawn combined together with two bishops, and this is how AlphaZero wins, presumably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Our problem is that we are not AlphaZero.
Right.
We don't know if the lines we are providing do make sense.
Well, at least I think so far we have guessed quite a lot of moves because in the semi-final, in the second game between Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with black pieces against Alexander Grischuk, we were having tough times.
Oh, it was such a complex game.
It was very difficult to guess, I mean, the moves. But at least so far, what we are actually following and explaining, it really makes sense. So far, I think we have guessed quite a number of moves here.
Well, and you know what? While preparing for today's broadcast, I was asked to do this voiceover that you guys possibly could hear during the open video. And it is made by Yannick Pelletier, who is, the text is provided by Yannick Pelletier, who is the press officer here. And I've discovered for myself, once again, I think that we were not informed after the game, that once again, Maxime benefited from his opponents being aggressive. Maxime offered the draw at some point, and Grischuk declined. Same as in the game where Maxime Vachier-Lagrave won with black against Topalov. So, very complex position. He was to offer a draw at some point. Topalov declined and lost, and then Grischuk declined and lost.
Yeah, I don't know what has been going on in this game. Has either of the players offered a draw or not? Because we have been following all of the games so far, and by the way, not a single time I managed to see this actual moment when they're offering the draw. I mean, they make the move, supposedly there was a draw offer, but how do they...
On the afterwards, it turns out that, there is a draw offer, there was a draw offer. Okay, so... A couple of hours of this final game is already in the books. Maxime is still thinking after bishop d2. It's move number 21 for him. Less than half an hour left, so potentially might be a time trouble as well. So far, Mamedyarov's chances look superior.
Right.
So what do? I believe we are ready to make a short break to show some ads, and we'll be back with the guy who already got a mention just a couple of minutes ago. Yannick Pelletier is about to join us. So, guys, stay tuned. In a couple of minutes, I'll be back with Yannick Pelletier.
Yeah, see you soon.
Ну, отдохни тогда, да? We are back with Yannick Pelletier, the press chief of this tournament, and I believe known much more for his chess playing skills. So I need your expert opinion, Yannick, on what you think about this game one of the final.
Well, I'm not sure about the expertise, but it doesn't look too good for black, I would say. It seems Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is struggling, and I think a clear sign for that is also the clock situation, when
Yeah.
he's down to something like 20 minutes or...
Yeah, I believe he sort of taught us that he's such an expert in Grunfeld, so it doesn't matter what he does. At some point you think, okay, maybe everything is prepared, and maybe he has everything under control, but the feeling really is that something went wrong.
Yeah, this pawn on d6 now is a real thorn in the position, and
That's
perhaps
too long.
also-
That's not the actual position. Yeah, rook takes c1
He's
was
exchanged,
played
yeah.
by was played by Maxime.
it's not too clear what or where his best chances lie. Should he try to exchange all rooks? I mean, the king is also a little weak.
But mainly for
Not easy.
black, yeah?
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah,
White king,
yeah, I
even
didn't
at some
really-
point we were looking at black takes on h3, white doesn't
It's
really
true.
care.
It's true that I could have made mention of these double pawns and destroyed white king, but it's not really felt anyhow. So yeah, probably he's going to take back with the rook.
Aha, so rook
He
takes,
has.
rook takes,
He has.
and he has played rook c8.
yeah.
Because at some point we were looking at rook d8, attacking the d6 pawn, and then at least what we thought was that white can play a tricky rook d1 move, so that if black takes twice, it's bishop a5 check.
And bad luck.
Once
yeah.
again, I can, already had shown this line a few times, but yeah, takes, bishop c4 check, and wins. And then, depending on what the black does, white is on time seemingly to move both bishops away and to guard d6 pawn. Rook c8.
So he's giving up a pawn, basically.
Yeah, white can already go for this opposite colored bishops, yeah?
Yeah, although he has to watch out for a queen c1 check and
Takes,
potentially-
takes, and takes here.
Yeah. Well,
But
watch
maybe you
out.
don't need the second A pawn.
No,
here.
perhaps
maybe you
you
just
don't.
play like king g2 for
But one of
instance.
the main ideas is to go to c7 with the queen.
Ah, yeah.
I mean, so you take a pawn
So you
on the
take
way.
and then you are threatening to put the queen on c7, which is which
Serious,
is true.
Okay, queen c1, bishop f1 doesn't seem to be...
Check.
Draw.
No,
So-
yeah. The problem with queen c1 is that king g2, which seems to be the safe square, is actually kind
Yeah,
of
now
runs
it's draw,
into perpetual, and I'm not even sure if white has
Well, he
the
can-
way back.
He can go back with the queen to e1, but exchanging queens means probably a draw here.
Yeah.
I mean, white's only chance... I mean,
Yeah,
let's
but
say
probably he
white's
go
main
bishop
thing...
f1,
Yes,
yeah?
bishop f1, and we play on. Huh? And white's main trump, this pawn on d6, needs the support of the queen. I mean, without queens on the board, it's very likely to be a draw. And that's why he has to
and
play
being
bishop
as
f1.
it is, it's not so easy for black to actually prevent queen c7 or queen a7, and it will be 2 pawns. So even this position, and some players I can imagine would be like extremely happy with this position, me included, because I understand that white can never ever run
Yeah.
into any sort of trouble, so just like playing for a draw plus, and this plus is quite substantial. The chance that white's going
yeah.
to win is quite substantial. But Mamedyarov is known to be maximalist. I
Yeah.
assume he might look for even, better.
Or perhaps first of all, he's going to make sure that this line, taking the pawn, I mean, he's going to make sure if it's a win, he's going for that. If he feels,
right.
if he sees a win, he's going for that. That's the straightforward, straightforward line. No need to find any flash, anything special. So if he works out a win from there, then he's going to probably play it, and he has to make sure for it. But
Yeah.
for him, it's a huge advantage. I mean, you don't get occasions like this at such high level with so much at
Absolutely.
stakes. He's going to, concentrate all his energy and his strength to try and win this game because, it's a dream scenario for him so far. He got his prep in, apparently, and he got an advantage, and now he's definitely better. I don't know how much and whether it's enough, but for sure he's going to try and find...
Did he ever mention during the interviews, because he joined us a couple of times, but I don't think he ever said anything about his coaches, the team who is working for him, working with him? No, yeah?
No, I have seen one person with him whom I had never seen before. So I don't think it's a grandmaster. It might be just a friend or a
I think
helper or
it's
some moral support.
sort of a manager, and
maybe the manager.
the guy who helps him with, say, technology nowadays allows your coaches to be elsewhere and still have the connection, have possibility to ask them a question. Why I'm asking so? Because it seems that he is very well prepared with new ideas. So he surprised Wesley So in the semi-final. It was a nice trick in the Catalan, which costed So the game basically after 15 moves, 16 moves, something. Yes, it was like this. Novelty, one good move, which Wesley sort of guessed or found. The continuation of the analysis, blunder, loss. So it was less than 20 moves. Here as well.
Same or similar scenario so far.
Yeah, we managed to figure out that, well, at least according to database we have, Bishop f4 on move 12 was a new move, a sort of a surprise. Previously, Rook d1 was played against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave by Sebastian Bogner.
Okay.
And the game saw something like this: Bishop b2, e6. So, well,
that was okay.
The point is that Black is on time to put this knight c6, e6 resistance. So White is not so easy pushing the center forward. Well, what happened in our game was c takes, and you kind of want to play knight c6. Yeah, maybe he should have played d6 here. This we don't know. He went for knight c6, d5, and then again, our guess was that apparently knight d4 was more principal. Point being that after knight a5, Mamedyarov, who is prepared, spends 18 minutes. So that gives you an idea that probably knight a5 was not looked up in such detail.
And not the first line of the computer. Well, knight d4 looks logical. I mean, the knight on a5 is outside now, and we can see what happens in the game.
Sort of a typical Grunfeld knight there, but but at the same time it's not coming back.
Yeah, so knight d4 and
knight d4. But what was our concern there? That possibly knight e5 is a very unpleasant move to meet.
And queen d6?
Yeah, queen d6, then we thought takes, knight c4, and probably there is some line how Black holds it with bishop a6 and then some rook to c8. Okay. But this you have to know, yeah? And from afar, it could have been that he simply was not ready for this, And otherwise, once again, it was... You know, the speculation, like queen d8, and then once again, it is possible that, let's say, you're using the computer says that, okay, this is playable. Who knows? Maybe this is playable. Because of, takes, bishop e5, then taking the bishop on d3. But it's really hard to believe, and even if it's true, if you're not prepared, you never ever go for it, because you might just lose after a couple of minutes. So in this regard, knight a5, of course, is understandable, but looking at this position, and even h3, because we were not sure if there wasn't anything more energetic, but even an h3 move, then all of a sudden, Black doesn't really have moves.
And Mamedyarov, just saw him exchange rooks on c8 in the game.
Yeah, so he
has a significant advantage on the clock and on
rook
position.
To c8.
Vachier-Lagrave doesn't seem too worried, although I'm sure he's doesn't feel too great.
So takes, and what's the move now? We said bishop a5 is an option. At the same time, I'm thinking, this is like better forever as well, if I put the pawn on d7, perhaps?
For sure, yeah.
Or... who knows, maybe bishop e4, queen d3. Well, essentially, if the pawn gets to d7, it seems it will never ever be taken. So it's a huge advantage for Mamedyarov. Now, everything is clarified, I believe. And we can claim that it's a huge advantage. It's a big chance for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov.
It's not even clear what Black's next move is going to be here. I mean, you can't really
if I play a move like king g2.
King g2,
You're right, yeah.
You know, the knight doesn't move much, and does he? Oh, yeah. King b2. Okay, we have it. Yeah.
Wow.
We guessed it just a few seconds before.
Before he actually made the move. Yeah, that seems to be...
It's also unpleasant for Black, because he's kind of saying to Maxime, okay, now your move. Try and deal with your bad position.
Yeah, right, because that's... the moment Shach played h3, once again, would like to return here and say that we were looking at much more energetic moves, like knight to e5, which once again allows queen d6, maybe black holds. But there were options, let's say. And then he plays h3, and that's one of the possible ways to play. So that you make the move, which is very useful for your position, and you also apply some pressure on your opponent, like, your position is that bad that I can play h3. And by the same token,
Can he just exchange rooks there?
After h3. Yeah, that's what we thought was needed. I was a bit surprised when he went for this. Yeah, after h3. That's what we thought was needed, like, to take. There seems to be a kind of a logical follow-up of what he was doing. Not that this position is brilliant.
Not so nice, but
still, white is better, perhaps. Yeah, well, we were looking with Artus at this position. Rook takes, and then you have to take with the bishop, and then white starts doing something. Maybe this time white goes for knight e5, because queen d6 here looks quite dangerous, right? Knight c6, even though, once again, who knows? You have to really know the answer in advance. Yeah, bishop e5. Maybe black is just on time to run with the king. Doesn't seem to be likely, but yeah, who knows?
Well, in any case, he decided on his... Probably he did not assess the position correctly after e6.
Yeah, e6, once again, looks the most principal move, looks like the move where how black is supposed to solve all the problems in Grunfeld, undermining the center. Well, it turns out the problems are not solved this way in this particular game. Yeah. What was surprising to me that in this moment after e takes f7, black spent almost 14 and a half minutes recapturing on f6.
Okay, bishop takes g2, bishop d5, many moves.
Yeah, could be, but the feeling is like he was really like calculating something. So that might be an interesting point to ask them later. I mean, if there will be a press conference. I mean, there's inevitably going to be a press conference. Doesn't matter what the result is.
He will give some answers for sure.
All right, and then in the final position,
bishop d8 here.
The conclusion is that bishop to d8 played. We can't say much. Yeah.
No, well, it's a solid what to do. It's a solid move, but the position isn't too good. So at least he keeps his pawn. I mean, his pawn. His knight and pawn on a5. Let's say he's not losing a pawn. But
right, bishop a5. I was trying to understand. I mean, what's the point? Maybe queen c5. Well, it makes queen c5 potentially possible. I don't know if it's a good move. Yeah, but queen c5 was not possible to play at all. After bishop d8, it is a possible move.
But the position remains very unpleasant for the French, for sure. We'll see how it goes. I think I'll leave my seat again, or not my seat,
thanks.
but
thanks, Yannick. But we've discussed something, and those draws offers that you mentioned. I mean, I said today on air that it's very interesting to know, because we are only getting to know afterwards, the day after that. Well, in fact, the game Maxime won, it happened twice. In the games he won with black, in both games at some point he was offering a draw.
It's time for him to offer a draw now. I'm not sure
he's very unlikely to win it. I believe Mamedyarov will decline, but this is the game you're not winning.
But the point is about offering a draw and winning the game anyway later on. So that's if he's superstitious, then he might do it, but I'm not sure it would be well accepted. All right,
so thanks for joining, and we'll be back in the usual composition in a couple of minutes, and hopefully Yannick will join us later. Okay, meanwhile, I'm trying to understand what exactly happens after bishop d8. I mean, white has quite a few attractive options. I would be looking at repositioning the queen from a3 somewhere elsewhere, ideally to e8. So I was looking at queen a4, but perhaps queen c6 is ready in this case. Once again, that's a separate topic. I mean, how to access various possible endgames like this, like queen takes c6, knight takes c6, and it's out of question white is better, but how much exactly, and
Right.
You know.
And I did not exactly hear what you're discussing with Yannick here, but I was told there was one slight mistake which we actually did not notice on the board, because we were trying to make work this line with rook takes on c1 and rook d8. There was one little nuance we missed, and I was told it while I was on my break, that here after rook c1, rook cn, and rook d8, which was the big point for us, unfortunately for black this loses because of bishop takes on a5, b takes, rook c7, and queen d6. Now you probably see it yourself.
Oh yeah, queen b3, queen f7.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we just did not notice it immediately, and then okay. I mean, if
So this wins on the spot. So, there was no such idea.
yeah, there was no such idea. We were trying to make it work, but it doesn't work, and I'm
Bishop
sure
a5, rook c7. Yeah, just wins on the spot.
we just missed it. But
Okay, therefore rook c8 was what. But then it kind of explains why black was so unhappy here.
Right.
Thinking for such a long time, yeah, and he eventually decided to go for it. And wait, and rook d8 here is the same thing.
well, presumably that
Yeah,
was
just
better,
take,
but
yeah.
I mean, still, this is quite terrible.
Check, queen f7. Yeah, that still wins.
Probably.
Similarly still wins. Okay, so rook takes, rook c8 played. Rooks got exchanged, then king g2. Just a nice little move, making life even...
I mean, it's not even clear the pawn on h3 is relevant or not, but the threats for white are not going anywhere, and the pawn on d6 is still as powerful as it was.
So bishop to d8 was played.
Right.
Bishop e4, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And Maxime went with queen to e6. Queen to e6. So queen d3 more or less forces this pawn's appearance on d7, yeah?
Right, because I would imagine you do not want to take the knight on a5, right? Like we discussed previously, and probably also you did with Yannick.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like here, it might be winning, it might be not, right?
Right.
While you have two bishops, it's clear white has all the advantage, all the control, never loses, and has good winning chances. So you only go for these opposite colors if you have like a clear idea on how do you win this position.
Right, so yeah, you're absolutely right. I think queen d3 is the safe move, which keeps all the threats and advances the pawn. So what do you do after queen d3? I mean,
Yeah, probably king has to move so that bishop d5 doesn't actually win the
Right.
queen. Yeah. So for instance, some sort of king to g7 possibly, and then yeah, d7 it would be the move I would be looking at.
So what do you do if you are the defender here? Do you want to exchange queens? Probably you do.
Yeah, well, perhaps now that I'm looking at it, perhaps I want to swap the queens. Yeah.
So that you can bring the king closer to the passed
To the
pawn.
d pawn. Yeah.
Yeah, and then try to take it somehow. So I would imagine something like perhaps queen c4 might be idea, not to mention, I mean, queen a2, by the way, is also a move you need to address.
Yeah, queen a2 is the move, yeah. Just keep forgetting that this little thing was hanging. Well, perhaps white might have some unexpected ideas like bishop d5 followed by queen e3 to h6.
Right.
But again, it's not 100% clear because queen a4, queen to e3, well, threatening a check from h6, yeah, very unpleasant one. Then this might happen.
Well, somehow
Who
it
knows?
holds.
Well, yeah, it does seem to be holding for now for black, at least for us mortals. You know, maybe Magnus would say that this is still winning because black pieces are not moving. White has two bishops.
I don't think it's so easy.
Yeah, it doesn't
Because the
seem to
pawn
be
is
so
going nowhere. It's stuck on d7, and black can actually improve his position.
Maybe the whole concept of putting the pawn on d7 is not right. I'm not sure. Well, queen d3 is played, and so is king g7. So bishop e4, queen e6, queen d3, king g7 on the board. Mamedyarov's to move. He's got 40 minutes, I believe, 42 minutes.
I would imagine I want somehow to open up the position a little because then increases the power of the bishops. I'm not sure about the pawn on a2, but if I was white, I was thinking about f4.
F4 makes actually, I tend to agree, F4 makes a lot of sense. 4 makes a lot of sense.
Because this is quite a known strategy by... very good players that you can combine the positional threats with actual attack on the king. With the queens on the board, with slightly exposed black king, white can try to combine his positional game with creating some additional threats for the black king. And in this case, f4 actually helps because it opens the position.
Yeah, or to start with bishop c3 with the same idea to play f4, right, and then as well... creating some tactical motives on e5. Yeah, but f4 seems to be a decent move. Well, Shakhriyar played something. No, he actually preferred to play
bishop c3.
Bishop c3 first, which was answered with queen f6.
Which was
that's a drawback.
Blitzed out.
Yeah, that's a drawback of putting the bishop on c3 so that queen goes to f6 and then black starts speculating at those checks. Yeah.
Right. So I would imagine queen d5 immediately runs into some perpetual, does it? Queen d5, queen g5 must be the idea. So how do you escape from the checks?
To f1, and
queen
I'll
c1,
be forced to go bishop e1.
Right, so you probably don't want to do this.
Which might not be the end of the world, by the way, because I'm planning queen e6. But yeah, this leaves me with an unpleasant feeling of pinning my own bishop to putting it to e1. No thanks. So it's time to look and to find some better move.
And look how Maxime actually he was responding with after every single move Shakhriyar made. He responded very quickly. Thus, he's trying to also increase the pressure on his opponent that supposedly he's having a bad position, but he's not going to give up so easily. And at least he is down on time comparing to Shakhriyar's clock, if I did see correctly.
Was it? This was the move. Yeah, then this makes it absolutely unplayable. Check here, and all of a sudden queen c4, as we said, trading the...
Yeah, that should favor black, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's the feeling, like this... the game still goes on because this knight is not moving just yet. But the real problem is, the d-pawn without the queens, it's strangely enough, it's not that easy to promote. Even b5 knight
b5,
c4,
exactly.
who knows?
b5 knight c4 suddenly comes into game, so it's not so clear.
Well, white is still better, but is it winning? Not sure at all.
Well, if I was white, I would want to keep queens on the board to create these additional threats against the black king.
So maybe we do this. King to f1, if black insists on it, okay, or to f4, I don't know. King to g2, in this case. King to e2, So e5 still hanging. What I find to be very important and what I'm trying to prevent this knight from moving anywhere. So I want it to be on a5 for as long as possible. And
there's also this positional threat, queen d3 to a6. And the question is, how do you guard a pawn on a7?
Yeah. No. If white's king is safe, there is always an idea to how to improve the position, moving the queen. Queen b5, targeting e5, going to d7 is another possible.
If I say Shak already played king f1, is that correct?
Was it?
I think so. At least I see it on the live board.
Yeah, king f1's played.
King f1, and Shakhriyar is looking very confident right now. He's probably quite sure he holds quite a big advantage. Perhaps he's not exactly sure. Is it winning or not? It feels like a technically winning position with such a passed pawn, and the knight on a5 is completely out of the game. So definitely... you can understand why he's confident. And queen on a6 is actually at some moment a big threat. You need to counter it. Obviously, white is not going to trade the pawn on d6 for the pawn on a7.
But especially if this queen leaves to g5 and king e2 is played.
So that might become a problem.
And black still has to care of his e5 pawn, because queen d5 as well is a threat. Yeah, well, honestly, looks depressing. Looks depressing.
I think it's just
for black.
losing, to be honest. Oh, he resigns. Wow.
Is it right?
I think so, unless...
No, I mean it can't be a draw offer. Let's be honest. It can't be
serious.
It can't be a draw offer. So I believe Maxime was so disgusted with himself.
Did he resign? Really?
Let's wait for the confirmation. Let's wait for the confirmation. Because yes, I can imagine it's a very ugly position to play. But in order to resign this, yeah, the king on d5, the king on e4. So Shakhriyar Mamedyarov wins first game.
Wow, this is unexpected. Okay, for sure, I thought that black's position is so terrible, but
Man, in
definitely
2.5 hours, that's the second time Shakhriyar Mamedyarov brings up an early surprise, and 2.5 hours it takes him. It was the same scenario in the semi-final when he destroyed Wesley So after Wesley didn't react to the novelty properly.
Well, this is quite unexpected. I mean, I was expecting some sort of...
yeah, you do expect a win from white in such position.
Maybe it's just dead loss, because queen d5 is a threat. You have to counter, and the knight on a5 is out of the game. So, I mean, probably you're right. He was so depressed with his position. He felt he's not going to hold it. So he is just trying to save some energy for tomorrow's game. But wow,
yeah. On the other hand,
it.
now that I'm thinking, okay, what do you do? Okay, you can play this move, as we figured out. It's king e2, yeah, and then what? And then queen d5 or queen a6, as you said, the very next move.
Right.
Maybe it is. Well, in fact, it is lost. It just you do not expect such players to fall apart that quickly. So once again, if we try to come back a little in this game, so move 15, or no, which was it? Move 12 was a novelty.
Move 12.
Bishop to f4.
Yeah, bishop f4 was amazing. New move.
So c takes, c takes. Then we are not 100% sure. I mean, what happens if black tries to switch the moves order, like play e6 then knight c6? But knight c6 seems to be the most principal choice.
Right.
d5, and then, yeah, perhaps knight a5 is already, knight a5
well, it felt like a positional
is
mistake,
already
didn't
not
it?
ideal. Yeah, well, if I get it right, we will have a chance to ask someone who knows.
Right.
Yeah. So, it will be like that. Now that I know, so it will be a quick interview with Maxime, and then hopefully Shach will join us in a studio to explain what was happening in this game.
Thanks a lot, Maxime, to join us after this unfortunate start in this final. Well, tell us how or where did it go wrong?
It probably went wrong when I played knight c6, because after d5 my first idea was knight g4, take, rook c1, rook c8. But then after queen b4, maybe some other moves, but after queen b4 I thought suddenly it was very unpleasant for me. And in the game, actually I thought I was getting away when I played f6, but I missed that after e5, bishop takes f3, then c takes f6, and after that I'm probably just lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems your opponents get to try very concrete preparation against your beloved Grunfeld. How difficult is it to to be like a target? People know you're going to play it, and you have to be always aware of these little things.
Well, it's the case for most people, but you can be a target in the Berlin, in the Marshall, but of course, maybe in the Grunfeld it's more like more concrete, and of course there's a lot of stuff to remember. And today I didn't remember how to play, but I should have done better anyway.
Tomorrow is the last game, the second game, last classical game, and you have to try everything. How will you try and prepare for that?
Well, a must-win situation is never pleasant, but I'll just be ready to play for as long as it takes.
All right, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
So, as I said, first game of the final was very complex. We couldn't figure out ourselves what was happening, so we needed a winner of this game. Congrats, Shach. Congrats on winning yet another game, seemingly from the preparation. Seems very much like the game against So in the semi-final. So you come up with an early surprise, and your opponent doesn't know what to do, so you became victorious. So a few words about what was going on.
I think it's against So, and here is absolutely different. Why? Because if in So game he play correct moves, is immediately draw. Yeah, I mean take knight e4 is very strong lines. If he find, is draw. But here is absolutely. I want to just get some playable games, got some good chess. And I play the bishop e4 is new move. Yeah, I prepare my it's my second offer me this move. And I mean I think knight e6 starts some bad move. Big probably is e6. I don't know, not because after d5 is also again I think it's bad move. Knight d4 only. I remember this line, and of course I think is still white is better here. I mean I don't like knight c6, knight d4 is not good idea for black. And it is maybe he afraid this, but here is a very strong move f5, and this looks very good. If take d6, take e4 is...
Yeah, we missed this move f5, but Shach told us that this is not the line black should be afraid of, and therefore he had to play knight d4.
Take, and I just play rook c1, rook c8, it's like, and queen b4, I mean, is white, and bishop b5 is coming.
Yeah, white is much better.
Yeah, it looks very bad. And I think after knight c6 is bad positions for...
Then, can I ask you the next move? So he went here.
I think I play h3 is very good. Yeah, it's a very good move. Yeah.
This was a good move.
It is like I play in Zagreb against Anand. I play h3 move. I remember this move. It was a very good move. I think about black plans, and I cannot find anything for black. I mean, better is just take, and rook c8 is only normal plans, because if e6 I think d6 every time.
Yeah.
And I play, and also is knight g5 is coming, and take, just take, yeah. And knight is coming, e6, c7 is very bad. And after h3 I calculate he need to play in game. Only take, but it looks very bad in game. Yeah, I can also play this very strong move, and if go and queen just back c1, I think
knight c6 in any moment.
It looks very bad. Yeah, and I play just h3 for I want to see what he wants.
What he does, and what he did was not good. Perhaps.
Yeah, but it's not easy to play. If you don't want to go end game, you need to play some moves. But which move? Yeah, everything is very bad. And also next moves I want to bishop d2 every time. I mean bishop d2 is immediately bad because e6. I think it's maybe only end game. End game looks very bad, and I understand him. I mean it is normal move for if you want to, and I think it's a very strong move.
e5,
yeah,
yes.
It's very strong.
And then another question, we were not sure when you took on he took on f3, he took on f6. That was the move we were looking at the studio, and then he spent like really a lot of time thinking. 15 minutes he was thinking on bishop f6. Was there some other option? Not really.
No, but because his positions looks like very bad. I mean, he want to maybe bishop f8, maybe find some. But okay, I think he understands his very bad positions, and he just plays his moves, and bishop d2. I think is very correct.
This is over.
Yeah, yeah. And after this, I think is losing positions is because not knight c6 is bishop minimum.
Bishop a6 always.
Yeah, I remember his game against Carlson. In,
Absolutely, this is
Zagreb, yeah, in last game, yeah. And this looks, without queens, it looks like same positions. And bishop d2, and he won't in the game. Okay, he has no chance. Okay, I just take, and I play king g2. Maybe king g2 is not important move because each 3 pawns. But I just again, I don't see how to play for him because my bishop is coming d5 firstly. And after bishop d5 is absolutely is like mate, yeah, and is because and bishop e4, queen c4 is if queen c4 he can play is okay, but here is very strong. d7 and bishop
h6,
yeah, same bishop. I mean here or queen d6, queen d6, knight c4. Yeah, maybe it's something like it. I don't know. Or queen somewhere.
Bishop e5 will
yes,
happen,
I mean he's
yeah.
losing positions. Yeah, and he played queen e6. Yeah, just and here bishop c3 is. I think they remove the h4 also is winning here. I think king e1 is just solid move. And problem is if okay, is my next move queen d5, yeah, or queen b5? Yeah. I don't know what he can. I don't know. Is queen f4 is losing. Okay, only move
queen g5, but
yeah, queen g5. I also here is minimum. I can act with my king, and again is queen is bishop f7 d7. Just it's very bad knight. And,
yeah, knight on a5 is not moving.
And is losing position.
Right. So. A lot of people don't play Grunfeld because they think there is nothing to do with white, and you today made it look so easily. So once again, congratulations and good luck tomorrow. Of course, Maxime will try to level the score, so you have a lot of stuff to prepare. Thanks for joining us, and we can let you go, and we will still stay for a few more minutes to wrap up the show.
Thank you.
So thanks.
Thank you.
So, we are here to conclude the first day of the final. It was a crushing victory.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, nobody really expected it because these were pretty much the two of the best players here in Riga Grand Prix, and to expect such a short crush by white, that was something.
Yeah, that was really impressive, and once again, maybe something
maybe it had something to do with what we were discussing before the match, that Shakhriyar seems to be a very inconvenient to play for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So this victory sets a record of 7 won games and only 1 loss.
Right.
For Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. So tomorrow, however, his task won't be that easy, because Maxime will have the white pieces and obviously will try to do maximum he can in order to guarantee himself a first in this tournament tie-break playoff.
Well, I mean, definitely the match is not over, and Maxime is such a fantastic player, so he'll find a way to bring tomorrow with some battle, but the task is going to be difficult because Shak has been showing such a solid chess and dynamic chess so far.
Yeah, I expect one e4 and then perhaps one e5 from Shak, and then not sure yet. It might be the real opus, it might be, bishop c4 possibly from Maxime, trying to go for some sort of Italian. We will see, we will find out tomorrow. Altogether 3 p.m. at local time here in Riga, the second classical game of the finals. And I believe that will be it. So before we say bye-bye, just let me once again remind you of the sponsors of World Chess, of this tournament, of who make the whole events, the whole Grand Prix cycle running. So it's Algorand, once again, the new addition to a list of sponsors. It's exclusive blockchain partner of World Chess. It's well known already for Agro, the official strategic partner. Kaspersky, the cybersecurity partner, and EG Capital Advisors, the official partner of World Chess as well. So, thanks to those guys, thank you guys, all of you who watched us today, and hope you were not disappointed. Yes, a bit quicker game, but since it is decisive, it means that tomorrow we also will have quite a lot of fight.
Definitely. So, thank you for watching us today, and come back tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.